Chapter 478. After staring blankly for a moment, Yun Yao came back to her senses. She stared at Bailey Ningsu and shook her head in disbelief.
Mother, you want me to be a heavenly consort? Didn't you tell me that you wouldn't force me to do anything I didn't want to do and that you wouldn't force me to be a heavenly consort?
Bailey Ningsu's expression didn't change. She said earnestly, Yao Yao, a mother knows her daughter best. I know your nature the best. If I didn't tell you that, how could you come back so quickly? Yun Yao was speechless. Her heart was filled with disappointment.
Bailey Ningsu continued, Yao Yao, you haven't been in Cloud Soul Palace all these years, so you don't know the situation of the Yun family.
Our Cloud Soul Palace is an ancient family and seems to be above the world. But in reality, the talents of the Yun family have withered in the past 100 years, and their power has been declining. The other two families have been eyeing our Yun family covetously. In recent years, they've been scheming and plotting against us. In recent years, if it weren't for the Son of Heaven secretly helping our Yun family, the other two families would have been even more arrogant and despotic. They would have attacked us a long time ago. The Son of Heaven has a noble status and is the #1 genius of the human race. He's also infatuated with you. Such a perfect match. Who else could it be but him?
Yao Yao, I'm not forcing you to be a heavenly consort to strengthen the Yun family.
I'm just thinking for your future. I hope you can find a better home so that you can live a peaceful and happy life. Bailey Ningsu was the divine doctor's daughter and the current mistress of the Yun family. How noble was her status. She naturally wasn't someone who fawned over others. She wouldn't sacrifice her daughter's happiness for the sake of strengthening the Yun family. She just wanted Yun Yao to have a more perfect and reliable home. Compared to the Son of Heaven, who had a noble status and outstanding talent, Ji Tianxing was just a nobody. He was just an ordinary person. If it were any other parent, they would have made the same choice as her. Yun Yao's eyes were covered with a layer of mist, and she shook her head repeatedly. Mother, no matter what, I will never become a heavenly concubine. If he didn't love her, he didn't love her. This had nothing to do with the Son of Heaven's status and talent. Please forgive your daughter. I can't go against my heart for the sake of the bigger picture. Bailey Ningsu knew Yun Yao's nature very well, so she wasn't surprised by what she said.
She sighed with a heavy heart and said calmly, Yao Yao, we can temporarily put aside the matter of you being a heavenly concubine.
However, you can never return to the Sky Pillar sect in the future. Seeing Yun Yao's tearful face, Bailey Ningsu continued, after the Sky Pillar sect suffered a great calamity, it's already in ruins and is in imminent danger. Perhaps after the Demon Emperor recovered his strength, he would make a comeback and go to the Sky Pillar sect to take revenge. Mother absolutely won't allow you to go back to the Sky-bearing sect and take risks. You also have to give up on this idea. Even if you stay in the Sky Pillar sect, it will be difficult for you to grow and improve in the future. In this lifetime, you will never be able to break through the limits of the Celestial Being realm and surpass the Sky Origin realm. Compared to the Sky Pillar sect, the Monarch Mansion is where you should go. Only the top geniuses can enter the Monarch Mansion and study the more exquisite martial arts there. Only in the Monarch Mansion will you have the chance to surpass the Sky Origin realm and become a Transcendent Spirit Refinement realm expert. The Monarch Mansion mentioned by Bailey Ningsu was one of the most mysterious and powerful forces in the Central State. The Monarch Mansion had thousands of years of inheritance and history. Its strength was incomparably powerful and unfathomable. No matter what happened in the Central State in these thousands of years, no matter how the situation changed, the Monarch Mansion had always stood tall. Regardless of the Southern Human Imperial Court, the Western Demonic Imperial Court, or the Eastern Water Imperial Court, none of them dared to become enemies with the Monarch Mansion. Of course, this was because the Monarch Mansion was too mysterious and powerful. It stood above the various forces and was unparalleled. However, there was another important reason. The Monarch Mansion was the top institution in the Central State, and even the entire Tianxian continent. It was also the sacred martial arts ground in the hearts of countless geniuses. Regardless of the race, as long as one had extraordinary talent and martial arts aptitude, they would have the chance to enter the Monarch Mansion and study the profound martial arts. For thousands of years, the Monarch Mansion had cultivated countless Transcendent Spirit Refinement realm experts. These Transcendent Spirit Refinement realm experts came from different races and had become influential figures in the Tianxian continent. Therefore, all the races were extremely respectful to the Monarch Mansion and did not dare to offend them. And those geniuses who could enter the monarch mansion to further their studies also had lofty statuses. They were highly regarded and favored by all the major forces. The disciples of all the major races, major forces, and aristocratic families in the central state all strived to enter the monarch mansion.
However, when Yunyao heard the words monarch mansion, she did not have the slightest yearning or expectation.
Instead, she revealed a trace of resistance. She had never thought of entering the monarch mansion and had always resisted it. She only wanted to save Ji Tianqing and was worried about the sky-bearing sect. It was impossible for her to enter the monarch mansion to study. "Mother, you know that I have already said that I don't want to enter." Yunyao refused with a firm tone. However, she was interrupted by Bailey Ningsu before she could finish her sentence. Bailey Ningsu looked at her with a serious expression and gently shook her head. She said with a gentle but firm tone, "Yao Yao, this is the decision that your father and mother have made together. It cannot be changed. Mother has already arranged everything for you. After a while, Mother will send you to the monarch mansion to study. You should also take this time to rest and prepare." Seeing that Yunyao was unwilling to relent, Bailey Ningsu added, "Yao Yao, father and mother are doing this for your own good. No matter how unwilling you are, you will understand our good intentions in the future." After saying that, Bailey Ningsu turned to leave. Yunyao hurriedly chased after her and grabbed her arm. She begged with a face full of worry, "Mother, daughter is begging you. Please save Tianqing." Bailey Ningsu stopped and turned to look at her. She said earnestly, "Yao Yao, Mother has already made it very clear to you. This child is not related to Cloud Soul Palace. If I save him, it will definitely cause criticism and affect the relationship between Cloud Soul Palace and the Imperial Court. How can Mother save him?" Yunyao was unwilling to give up. She asked, "Mother, are you really not going to save him?" Bailey Ningsu saw that her daughter was so stubborn and sad. She couldn't bear it. However, she closed her eyes and took a deep breath. She calmly explained, "Yao Yao, it's not that Mother doesn't want to save him. It's just that Mother is powerless. Although Mother has miraculous medical skills, I'm only at the heaven origin realm. I haven't reached the soul refinement realm. Your father is a transcendent realm expert. If he were to help, he would definitely be able to save that youth." Chapter 479. Bailey Ningsu had already made her stance very clear, and Yunyao's last bit of hope was instantly shattered. Tears fell uncontrollably from her big, clear eyes. Her lips moved several times, wanting to beg her mother again, but she couldn't say anything. Bailey Ningsu suppressed the pain in her heart and expressionlessly said, "Yao Yao, you're already very tired. You should go back and rest. As for that youth, if you want him to recuperate here, then let him stay here. Cloud Soul Palace won't save him, but they also won't drive him out so heartlessly. Tranquil Sky is suitable for resting souls and recuperating, so it's also good for him to stay here. As for whether he can wake up or not, that will depend on his own luck." After saying this, Bailey Ningsu walked out of the wooden house and left without looking back. Yunyao stood at the door in a daze, watching her mother's figure disappear into the distance. Her eyes were covered with a layer of mist, and her heart was filled with sorrow and helplessness. She originally thought that as long as she brought Ji Tianqing back to Cloud Soul Palace, there would definitely be a way to cure Ji Tianqing. Her mother had always been gentle and virtuous, and loved her dearly. Her father was also kind and dignified, treating her as the apple of his eye and never saying a harsh word to her. Yunyao thought that her parents would empathize with her and treat Ji Tianqing for her sake. She didn't expect that the end result would be like this. The hope that had risen in her heart with great difficulty was shattered just like that. However, her mother's reaction was also within her expectations. Even if her mother made this decision, she had nothing to complain about. She only hated that she wasn't strong enough and couldn't think of a better way for the time being. In Tianxing's most helpless moment, she could only watch helplessly. She could not do anything about it. After standing in silence for a while, Yunyao raised her sleeve to wipe away the tears in her eyes and turned to walk back into the house. She walked to the ice jade bed and stared at the sleeping Ji Tianqing. She whispered in a firm tone, "Tianqing, don't worry, I won't give up. No matter what, I will think of a way to save you. I will definitely wake you up as soon as possible." "Definitely." Yunyao quickly calmed down and began to think of all kinds of ways. Even if her parents could not save Ji Tianqing, She would do her best to help Ji Tianqing heal his soul. She prayed silently in her heart. Tianqing's luck was long and he was gifted. Perhaps there would be a miracle? In the dark and cold Kenshin tomb, under the pitch-black and ice-cold heavenly sword steel, a ball of spiritual energy wrapped around Ji Tianqing's soul and attached itself to the sword steel. At this time, the originally quiet white soul mist surged for a while and condensed into a palm-sized white person. It was Ji Tianqing. He had heard the conversation between Yun Yao and Bailey Ningsu clearly. Recalling Yun Yao's words, his expression was a little complicated. He muttered to himself in a low voice, "Eldest senior sister, I've wronged you. In the past, our hearts were connected, but we never said it to each other face to face. We hid our feelings in the bottom of our hearts. If I wasn't seriously injured and unconscious and my soul separated, I wouldn't have known that your feelings for me were so deep. You treat me like this, I, Ji Tianqing, will not let you down in this life." Ji Tianqing's expression was incomparably firm and solemn. In the next 3 days, Yun Yao was busy without sleep or rest. She had to give Ji Tianqing 2 soul-nurturing pills every day to nourish his soul. In addition, she also flipped through the books stored in several wooden houses, looking for a way to save Ji Tianqing. On the evening of the 3rd day, she finally found a clue in an old yellowed medical book that had many notes written on it. It was clearly written in the book that there was a sacred item called Nirvana Crystal that could strengthen the soul of a separated person and let the soul return to its original place. Ji Tianqing's current condition was that his soul was separated from his body. His soul was severely injured, and his strength was weak. A normal person's soul was like a torch that burned fiercely until the day it burned out, and they would die. However, Ji Tianqing's soul was like a candle. The flame was weak and would not be able to hold on for long before it was extinguished. When Yun Yao saw this, her eyes flashed with a bright light, and a strong sense of hope gushed out. She hurriedly continued reading, wanting to know what the Nirvana Crystal was and where she could get it. It was written in the book that the Nirvana Crystal, a sacred item, was said to be a treasure left behind by the divine beast Phoenix when it was reborn. According to the legends, the divine beast Phoenix was immortal and indestructible. It could continuously undergo nirvanic rebirth. The Nirvana Crystal produced by the Phoenix when it was reborn contained a supreme and mysterious power. That power could allow a separated person to be reborn like a phoenix and wake up again. What made Yun Yao the most excited and invigorated was that the Nirvana Crystal had appeared in the Central State 200 years ago. There were a total of 2 Nirvana Crystals, and they came from the Phoenix and the Phoenix respectively. They were a perfect pair. When those 2 Nirvana Crystals appeared in the Central State, it had once caused various powerhouses to fight over them, and various major powers fought for them. But in the end, that pair of Nirvana Crystals passed through several people's hands and landed in the hands of divine Dr. Bailey. From then on, that pair of Nirvana Crystals never appeared again. Regarding the news of the Nirvana Crystal, the medical book only wrote until here and did not continue. Yun Yao closed the medical book, and her charming face revealed a strong sense of hope as her eyes surged with a bright light. "That's great! I finally found a way to save Tianqing. Divine Dr. Bailey is my grandfather, and the Nirvana Crystal is actually with him." After a moment, her agitated emotions calmed down, and she frowned again. "But grandfather has already disappeared for many years. How am I going to find the Nirvana Crystal?" Yun Yao frowned and pondered for a while before getting up and walking out of the wooden house. She prepared to leave Tranquil Sky and ask the elders in her family about this matter. Walking to the small courtyard outside the wooden house, she activated Tranquil Sky's teleportation array. Swoosh! A white light flashed, and Yun Yao left Tranquil Sky and returned to the corridor on the 3rd floor of Nebula Hall. Just as she was about to leave, a clear male voice came from behind her. "Cousin Yao Yao, you're finally out." That was the voice of a young man, and his tone was filled with intimacy and joy. It was obvious that he was excited about Yun Yao's appearance. When Yun Yao heard this familiar voice, she stopped in her tracks and turned to look behind her. She saw a handsome young man in a blue brocade robe walking towards her with a smile on his face. That young man was about 30 years old, and he was tall and slender. His face was handsome and fair, and he was even holding an exquisite purple jade folding fan in his hand. This person's figure and appearance were excellent, and when he smiled, he made people feel as if they were bathing in the spring breeze, and they would never feel disgusted. This gentle and elegant noble young master was Yun Yao's cousin, Zhu Fifan. Zhu Fifan's mother was Bailey Ningsu's biological sister, so he called Bailey Ningsu his aunt. When Zhu Fifan was very young, his parents both died. Bailey Ningsu saw that he was young and lonely, so she brought him to live in Cloud Soul Palace. All these years, Zhu Fifan had been living in Cloud Soul Palace, and the servants of the Yun family respectfully called him Young Master Biao. Zhu Fifan inherited his mother's talent and ambition.
All these years, he had been diligently studying the art of medicine, and he already had the attainments of a grandmaster. However, his talent and attainments in the art of poison far exceeded that of medicine. He was not a common grandmaster of the art of medicine, but a grandmaster of the art of poison that made people tremble in fear.
Since Yun Yao was very young, Zhu Fifan had been caring and protective of her. Chapter 480. Yun Yao had a cold temperament and didn't want to waste time with Zhu Fifan. But Zhu Fifan was her cousin and deeply loved by her mother, Bailey Ningsu. Zhu Fifan greeted her with a heart full of joy, so she couldn't ignore Zhu Fifan like she ignored the maidservants and guards. Yun Yao nodded lightly to Zhu Fifan as a greeting, and she said calmly, "Cousin, you're looking for me?"
Zhu Fifan came before her and sized her up with a gentle gaze, and he said with a smile, "Yao Yao, I haven't seen you for a few years. I didn't expect you to become more beautiful like a fairy.
I heard you came back 2 days ago, but I haven't seen you. I haven't seen you for many years, and I miss you very much, so I came to see you and greet you." Zhu Fifan's words were full of intimacy, and his expression and tone were very natural. Even if he hadn't seen Yun Yao for many years, he didn't feel the slightest unfamiliarity or awkwardness. Yun Yao nodded lightly and said calmly, "Cousin, I still have something to deal with, so I won't accompany you." After she finished speaking, she turned around and was about to leave. But Zhu Fifan followed closely and asked with a concerned expression, "Yao Yao, I see your complexion isn't good, and your spirit is tired. Did something happen? You've been in tranquil sky these few days and didn't come out to see anyone. Could it be that you're in closed-door cultivation to heal your injuries?" When he saw Yun Yao frowning slightly and seemed to be thinking about something, Zhu Fifan continued, "Yao Yao, if you have any difficulties, just tell me, and I'll surely go through fire and water for you." Yun Yao stopped and glanced at him, and she thought to herself, "Cousin only has the strength of the 5th level of the origin core stage, and he's only skilled in the art of poison, but he can't help. But he's always been by mother's side all these years, so he might know something about the Nirvana Divine Crystal." When she thought up to here, she stared at Zhu Fifan and asked in a serious tone, "Cousin, I have something to ask you." Zhu Fifan saw that she wasn't as cold as before and actually had something to ask of him, so he said with a smile, "Cousin, feel free to ask, I'll tell you everything I know." Yun Yao lowered her voice and asked in a low voice, "Have you heard of the Nirvana Divine Crystal?" Zhu Fifan was instantly stunned, and the smile on his handsome face.
He glanced to the left and right, and when he saw there was no one in the corridor, he replied with a question.
"I've naturally heard of divine treasures like the Nirvana Divine Crystal. Furthermore, that pair of Nirvana Crystal was obtained by our grandfather, Divine Dr. Bailey. This matter is not too important a secret." She asked Zhu Fifan, "Cousin, do you know where the Nirvana Divine Crystal is now?" To ask to know where it? Yao. Fifan T wonder puzzin to ask him to S2's into asks to himself. To ask IUIS her. Into to Ningsu it and, of course. Zhu Fifan glanced at her playfully and said in a strange tone, "Cousin Yao Yao, you are looking for a donkey while riding a donkey. Don't you know that the Nirvana Divine Crystal has always been in your body?" Yun Yao's expression changed. She looked at him in confusion. "What? Why is the Nirvana Divine Crystal in my body? Why don't I know about it?" Zhu Fifan shook his head with a chuckle and sighed. "Ah, it seems that your aunt didn't tell you about it. When your aunt married into the Cloud Spirit Palace, your grandfather gave her the Nirvana Divine Crystal as her dowry and asked her to bring it to the Cloud Spirit Palace. When you were born, your body couldn't bear the bloodline of the Celestial Spirit Sacred Body, so your body died. You were a dead baby when you were born. Your body died, and only a trace of your soul was left. Your aunt and your husband were very sad at that time, and they were very busy. Later, your aunt took out a Nirvana Divine Crystal and put it in your body. Your husband used his power to help you recuperate for 7 days. Then you came back to life." After hearing Zhu Fifan's words, Yun Yao's expression changed. Her eyes were full of shock and confusion. I was a dead baby when I was born? How could there be such a thing? Why didn't I know about it? Why didn't anyone mention it to me? Zhu Fifan shook his head and said with emotion, at that time, the Cloud Spirit Palace was in chaos for a few days. The atmosphere was very depressing, and there were many rumors. Someone in the mansion secretly spread the rumor that you were an unlucky person who would bring disaster to the Cloud Spirit Palace. Your husband was furious and ordered that no one should talk about it. Otherwise, you would be severely punished. Since then, no one in the mansion dared to mention it. Your aunt and your husband loved you so much. Of course, they wouldn't tell you about it, so as not to affect your mood. So, it's normal that you don't know about it. Yun Yao nodded slightly. She finally understood the whole story. She was stunned. She looked at Zhu Fifan and asked, Cousin, how do you know about it so well? Zhu Fifan couldn't help laughing. He quickly explained, Cousin, have you forgotten that when you were born, I had already entered the Cloud Spirit Palace, and I was already 6 years old? Over the years, I accompanied my aunt and helped her manage the mansion's affairs. When she was free, she often talked about the past with me. She was very worried about you. Seeing that Zhu Fifan was going to continue, Yun Yao quickly waved her hand and interrupted him. Okay, cousin, I'll ask you one last question. Since there is a pair of Nirvana Divine Crystals, and one is in my body, the other one must be with my mother, right? Do you know where my mother usually hides the precious treasures? Zhu Fifan vaguely guessed something, but he didn't show it on his face and pretended that he didn't know anything. He pretended to think for a moment, and then said with uncertainty, according to my understanding of my aunt, if she has any precious treasures, she will put them in the secret chamber in the bedroom. Okay, thank you, cousin. Yun Yao was secretly happy. She thanked Zhu Fifan and quickly left. Zhu Fifan stood in the corridor and looked at her leaving figure. He frowned slightly, and a trace of doubt flashed in his heart. Cousin already has one Nirvana Divine Crystal in her body. Why did she ask about the other one? Could it be that she didn't use it for herself, but to help others? Thinking of this, Zhu Fifan couldn't help but raise his eyebrows. After Yun Yao left the Nebula Palace, she went straight to Bailey Ningsu's residence and rushed to the Thousand Cloud Palace. Since Bailey Ningsu was unwilling to save Ji Tianqing, she could only use the Nirvana Divine Crystal to wake Ji Tianqing up. One of the Nirvana Divine Crystals was in her body, and the other one was most likely hidden in the secret chamber in Bailey Ningsu's bedroom. After hearing this, Yun Yao had a bold idea in her heart. Although the idea was somewhat disobedient, it would also damage her reputation and bring a lot of rumors and criticism. However, as long as she could save Ji Tianqing, she didn't care about anything. Chapter 481. The Thousand Cloud Palace was extremely luxurious and vast. It had 3 floors. Among them, there were nearly 200 maids and guards. When Yun Yao entered the Thousand Cloud Palace, the sky was already dark. Night was about to fall. Many clever and obedient maids were lighting the lanterns in the Thousand Cloud Palace. While the maids were not paying attention, Yun Yao stealthily passed through the corridors and stairs and ascended to the 3rd floor. Relying on her memories from a few years ago, she stealthily found her way to Bailey Ningsu's bedroom and entered an exquisite and elegant room. Bailey Ningsu was not in the room. There were only 2 young maids in the room. The 2 maids were only in the mystic comprehending realm. Yun Yao used a small trick to knock them out. She did not have time to deal with the 2 unconscious maids. She hurriedly searched the spacious room. If I remember correctly, Mother would personally inspect the pill room at this time every day. It would take about an hour. I only have an hour. I have to find the Nirvana Divine Crystal as soon as possible. Yun Yao silently pondered. Her hands moved faster and faster. She was clearly flustered and anxious. In order to save time, she rummaged through the cabinets and chests. She did not have time to put the scattered items back to their original positions. In a short half an hour, she had searched the entire room. The room was in a mess, but she did not find the Nirvana Divine Crystal. Thus, Yun Yao lifted the curtain behind the golden bed and found the door to the secret room. She relied on her memories and her own attainments in array formations. It only took her half an hour to open the array formation of the secret room's door. Then, she entered Bailey Ningsu's secret cultivation room and rummaged through it. Bailey Ningsu's secret cultivation room was naturally one of the best secret rooms in Cloud Spirit Palace. It was even more effective than Tranquil Sky. After entering the secret room, Yun Yao entered an alternate space and arrived in a starry sky. In the cold and gloomy starry sky, specks of stars twinkled with silver light. The astral winds in the starry sky were biting cold. Other than a silver altar-like array formation, there was nothing else. Yun Yao searched around the array formation twice and found that there were many array formations hidden in the starry sky, hiding many things. However, she tried her best to decipher a few arrays, but all she found were a few books on alchemy and some rare herbs. Very quickly, an hour passed. Yun Yao anxiously cracked the array formation and constantly found some elixirs, pill furnaces, weapons, and so on. However, she still couldn't find the Nirvana Divine Crystal. When she broke the formation again and found a sword in the starry sky, her heart was filled with disappointment. When she came back to her senses, she realized that the 1-hour deadline had passed. It's over. I have to leave immediately, or else Mother will find out. Yun Yao cursed in her heart and quickly left the dark starry sky. When she left the secret room and returned to Bailey Ningsu's sleeping quarters, her figure appeared beside the golden Luan bed. Just as she was about to reach out and pull the curtain to cover the door of the secret room, she suddenly heard a cold shout. Yao Yao, what are you doing? Suddenly hearing this familiar voice, Yun Yao's body stiffened and her face turned pale. There was no doubt that Bailey Ningsu had returned to her sleeping quarters and caught her red-handed. She let go of the curtain and slowly turned around to see Bailey Ningsu standing in the middle of the room, angrily glaring at her. Mother, Yun Yao moved her lips with difficulty and wanted to explain something, but she found that she couldn't. Bailey Ningsu pointed at the messy room, as well as the two young maids who were still unconscious on the floor, her voice low as she asked. Yao Yao, you sneaked into Mother's sleeping quarters, knocked out the maids, and even turned the cabinets upside down to look for something. What kind of scandal is this? You've always been quiet, obedient, smart, and sensible since you were young. You've never done such a ridiculous thing. If Mother didn't see it with her own eyes, Mother wouldn't believe that such an outrageous thing was done by you. Speak. What are you looking for? Bailey Ningsu had always been gentle and virtuous. She had a calm and gentle temperament and was recognized as a good wife and mother. This was the first time Yun Yao had seen her mother so angry and reprimanded her in such a tone. However, before she sneaked into the Thousand Cloud Palace, she had already prepared for the worst. Since the matter had already been exposed and she had been caught red-handed by her mother, she might as well not hide it anymore. She pursed her lips and looked at Bailey Ningsu with a firm gaze. Mother, I heard that there is a sacred item called the Nirvana Crystal that can heal the injuries of people whose bodies and souls have been separated. When I was born I was a dead baby. You used the Nirvana Crystal to save me and bring me back to life. So, I want to find that Nirvana Crystal to save Tianqing. Hearing these words, Bailey Ningsu's expression changed and she angrily shouted, Yao Yao. You're really... Have you lost your mind? The Nirvana Crystal is not only a sacred item that is hard to come by in 1,000 years, it is also a dowry that your grandfather gave to Mother. It is also one of the most precious treasures of Cloud Soul Palace. You actually want to use the Nirvana Crystal to save that young man? You are too preposterous. Bailey Ningsu never thought that Yun Yao, who had always been cold and indifferent, would do something that only a naughty girl would do. Moreover, the Nirvana Crystal was an incomparably precious sacred item, a rare treasure. Other than her closest relatives, she would never give it to anyone else. Even her sister's orphan, Zhu Fifan, who had always been by her side, would not be able to obtain the last piece of Nirvana Crystal. Yun Yao looked at Bailey Ningsu without backing down and said in a low voice, Mother, before this, you kept telling me that you were powerless to save Tianqing, and that you couldn't do anything either. But, you clearly still have a piece of Nirvana Crystal in your hands. I know that the Nirvana Crystal is very precious, but it is after all a worldly possession. How can it be compared to a human life? Bailey Ningsu looked at Yun Yao. Seeing how stubborn she was, she couldn't help but sigh. Say, Yao Yao, you have already been bewitched by that young man to the point that you have lost your mind. Mother has already said all that needs to be said. Today's matter ends here. Go back and have a good rest. Calm down and reflect. After saying that, Bailey Ningsu turned around and looked elsewhere, no longer looking at Yun Yao. Yunyao took a deep breath and suppressed the disappointment in her heart. She quickly left the bedroom. She walked out of the thousand-cloud palace with an indifferent expression. Her figure passed through the gloomy night and returned to Nebula Palace. After a quarter of an hour, she returned to tranquil sky and entered Ji Tianqing's wooden house. The wooden house was silent and the air was filled with dense soul power. Very quickly, her emotions and soul calmed down. She sat beside the frigid ice jade bed and quietly stared at Ji Tianqing as she sank into deep thought. 4 hours passed and she didn't move an inch. 12 hours passed and she still maintained her original position. An entire day passed. She finally made up her mind. She looked at Ji Tianqing with a determined gaze and muttered in a low voice. Tianqing, even if my mother doesn't save you, I will. When I was corroded by the devil Qi and almost lost my life, it was you who saved me with your Kenshin bloodline. Chapter 482. Yunyao finally made up her mind. She wanted to take out the Nirvana Divine Crystal from her body and place it in Ji Tianqing's body to heal him. Although she knew that doing so would likely have some serious consequences, she was still fearless. However, she was fearless and couldn't care less. After that, she took out a few pills and swallowed them. Then, she sat cross-legged beside the ice jade bed and began to recover her strength. 2 days later, she had recovered about 80% of her strength. She continued to search for the Nirvana Divine Crystal in her body. She didn't know about the Nirvana Divine Crystal before, and didn't notice the abnormality in her body. Now that she knew about the existence of the Nirvana Divine Crystal, it only took her a few hours to find it. The Nirvana Divine Crystal that Bailey Ningsu placed in her body was hidden in the depths of her mind. She used her spiritual sense to search carefully, and saw that it was a diamond-shaped crystal the size of a pigeon's egg and was as red as fire. The Nirvana Divine Crystal quietly floated in her mind, silently guarding her soul. It seemed extremely mysterious and profound. It contained an extremely powerful and mysterious power, but it was very hidden and restrained. If she hadn't used her spiritual sense to search carefully, she wouldn't have noticed it at all after searching for a few hours. Yunyao used her spiritual sense to enter the depths of her mind and slowly extended it toward the Nirvana Divine Crystal, wrapping it up. This process was very slow and consumed a lot of time and energy. Although Yunyao was very careful, her spiritual sense was quickly dissipating, and her cultivation was also rapidly depleting. When she wrapped the Nirvana Divine Crystal with her spiritual sense and gently shook it, intense stabbing pain came from the depths of her soul. At that moment, the extreme pain made her soul tremble. Her whole body trembled and broke out in cold sweat. But she gritted her teeth and endured the pain. Bit by bit, she pulled the Nirvana Divine Crystal out of her mind and made it fly to the top of her head. Wave after wave of stabbing pain came to her soul, making her endure unimaginable suffering and pain. Her body trembled, her face was pale, and large beads of sweat rolled down her forehead. She was in so much pain that her whole body convulsed and her nerves were about to be twisted. This was definitely the most painful and torturous moment in her life. PFFF, finally, Yunyao spat out a mouthful of blood and became extremely dispirited. 100 breaths of time later, when the Nirvana Divine Crystal flew out from the top of her head, a large gap seemed to have been cut open in her soul. Yunyao spat out another mouthful of blood. Her entire body became extremely dispirited, and her eyes dimmed, without any spirit. At this moment, her life aura was extremely weak, and her soul fluctuations had become chaotic and rapidly weakening. She was like an old woman who was about to reach the end of her life. She could already see death approaching. Her consciousness became more and more blurry, and her eyes gradually turned black. She was about to faint. However, Yunyao clenched her teeth and persevered with a tenacious belief in her heart. No, I can't faint. I want to save Tianqing, but I haven't done it yet. Yunyao tried her best not to faint. Pursing her lips, she used her spiritual sense to control the Nirvana Divine Crystal and slowly flew towards Ji Tianqing. Although she was only 2 meters away from Ji Tianqing. Normally, she would use her spiritual sense to control something to fly 2 meters away, and it would be done in the blink of an eye. But now, a mere 2 meters away was the furthest distance in the world to her. She used the last of her strength to control the Nirvana Divine Crystal and moved it towards Ji Tianqing bit by bit. 100 breaths of time later, the Nirvana Divine Crystal finally drilled into Ji Tianqing's forehead and entered his mind. At that moment, a dark red light flashed across Ji Tianqing's body. His lifeless and cold body actually had a trace of heat. Yao felt that subtle change and knew that she had finally succeeded.
Her face, which was as pale as paper and had gradually lost its vitality, squeezed out a faint smile and revealed an expression of relief. Pff, an unparalleled pain came from the depths of her soul, causing her to spit out a mouthful of blood again.
All her strength was completely exhausted, leaving not even a drop left. She could no longer support herself and fell to the ground. With a muffled thump, Yao fell to the ground and lost consciousness. At the moment before she fainted, she only had one thought in her mind. Tianqing, you must wake up and live well. Then, endless sleepiness and darkness gushed out from the depths of her soul, completely engulfing her consciousness. Tianqing, who was lying on the ice jade bed, was still as silent as before, as if he didn't know anything about all of this. The only change was that a faint red light lingered around his body, and his body was slowly recovering its temperature. Inside the Thousand Clouds Palace, Bailey Ningsu was sitting in front of a table in her bedchamber, engrossed in reading an ancient book. A young maid came over and gracefully added spices to the incense burner. Bailey Ningsu slightly frowned and put down the ancient book in her hand, sighing softly. Sigh, the maid's body shook, and she hurriedly asked in a gentle voice, "Mistress, are you worried about eldest miss again?" "Yes." Bailey Ningsu nodded. For the past 2 days, she had been frowning, and her heart was filled with worries.
After a moment of silence, she faintly said, "I hope that Yao can calm down and reflect for a few days, and understand my good intentions." As soon as her voice fell, a young maid rushed in like a gust of wind from the entrance of the sleeping chamber.
The maid's face was filled with fear, and she used all her strength to rush into the bedchamber. She anxiously shouted, "Mistress, something bad has happened. Eldest senior sister's soul lamp is about to extinguish." After the maid breathlessly finished speaking, Bailey Ningsu's body trembled, and her face became extremely ugly. "What?" She stood up with a swish, and her eyes were like lightning as she stared at the maid and shouted, "What happened?" The maid was also filled with fear, and did not know what to do.
With a sobbing voice she said, "Mistress, quickly come and take a look."
Bailey Ningsu did not have time to think. Her figure flashed out of the bedchamber, and she quickly rushed to the Soul Hall. There was a high platform in the Soul Hall, and it was divided into 6 steps. According to the rules, hundreds of soul lamps were placed on it. The owners of these soul lamps were the direct descendants of the Yun family, and the soul lamps of the upper echelons. Once something happened to someone outside, the soul lamp would change. If the soul lamp extinguished, it meant that the person's soul was destroyed, and they were completely dead.
Bailey Ningsu looked at one of the soul lamps on the 3rd row, and saw that the originally bright soul lamp had turned into a weak little flame, and could be extinguished at any time.
Seeing this, she felt as if she had been struck by lightning. Her face was as white as paper, and her body trembled a few times. The heavy blow caused her mind to go blank, and she almost fainted on the spot. In the next moment, when Bailey Ningsu regained her senses, she turned and rushed out of the Soul Hall without hesitation, and rushed to the Nebula Hall at the fastest speed in her life. Chapter 483. Swoosh. With a flash of white light, Bailey Ningsu appeared in tranquil sky and landed on the peak of the mountain. Her face was pale, and she anxiously ran through the small courtyard, rushing into the wooden house as fast as lightning. When she entered the wooden house and saw the situation inside, her face turned even uglier. Her heart ached so much that it was about to bleed. She saw Yao lying unconscious on the ground. Her face was pale and her body was lifeless. The corner of her mouth, her white dress, and the floor made of requiem wood were all stained with dark red blood. Yao! Bailey Ningsu cried out in pain as tears immediately flowed out of her eyes. She rushed to Yao's side and hugged the unconscious Yao in her arms. She circulated her energy to check on Yao's injuries. After a few breaths, Bailey Ningsu found that Yao's body was on the verge of death and her soul was extremely weak. Most importantly, the Nirvana Divine Crystal in Yao's body had disappeared. Bailey Ningsu turned to look at Tianqing on the icy jade bed. She saw that his body was glowing red and was gradually recovering his vitality. She understood everything. Yao! My daughter, why are you so stupid? Idiot! Bailey Ningsu looked up at the sky and cried out in grief. Her body went limp as she fell to the ground. She hugged Yao tightly in her arms as tears flowed out of her eyes uncontrollably. However, She was still the divine doctor's daughter and the mistress of the Yun family. She had experienced many storms and hardships in her life. Even though her heart was filled with grief, she quickly calmed down. She carried the unconscious Yun Yao out of the wooden house and left Tranquil Sky. Bailey Ningsu returned to the Thousand Cloud Palace as fast as she could. She anxiously opened the secret chamber and entered the dark starry sky. She placed Yun Yao in the center of the array and waved her hand to release rays of spiritual light, quickly activating the array. The huge array released an earth-shattering green spiritual light that flowed into Yun Yao's body continuously, instilling her with boundless vitality. Then, Bailey Ningsu quickly took out all kinds of elixirs and used her true essence to transform them into spiritual light before injecting them into Yun Yao's body. 6 hours later, after stabilizing Yun Yao's injuries, she took out a fiery red crystal from her interspatial ring. Without a doubt, this crystal that contained a mysterious power was another Nirvana divine crystal. Bailey Ningsu naturally wouldn't keep such an important sacred item in her room. All these years, she had been carrying it in her interspatial ring. Bailey Ningsu stood above the formation and looked at the Nirvana God crystal with a solemn expression. She used a secret technique and shot out a few rays of 5-colored light, controlling the God crystal to slowly descend and fly towards Yun Yao's forehead. After a full 100 breaths of time, the Nirvana divine crystal finally entered Yun Yao's forehead and entered the depths of her mind. After doing all this, Bailey Ningsu finally heaved a sigh of relief. She landed beside Yun Yao and looked at Yun Yao with a bitter smile. She murmured in a heavy and sorrowful tone, "Yao Yao, Yao Yao. Mother should have known that with your personality, you won't change your mind easily once you've made a decision. Once you've decided on someone, you won't change your mind. I don't know what kind of virtue or ability that young man has, to actually make you disregard your own life and sacrifice your own to save him. If you want to use this method to force Mother to take out another Nirvana divine crystal, you've already achieved your goal." Bailey Ningsu's tone was the same as her mood. It was full of sorrow, heaviness, and a strong sense of helplessness. Then, she sat down cross-legged beside Yun Yao. She formed a hand seal and used her Medicine Dao secret technique to help Yun Yao quickly absorb the Nirvana divine crystal and recover from her injuries. The starry sky was always dark and cold. The surrounding scenery seemed to never change. Even though time passed quickly, no one noticed it. Unknowingly, 2 days passed. Bailey Ningsu continued to help Yun Yao heal her injuries. In these 2 days, she had consumed more than half of her strength. She looked a little tired. Fortunately, Yun Yao's injuries had stabilized. After her soul absorbed the Nirvana divine crystal, it finally returned to normal. Although her body was still very weak and her soul injuries would only recover after a few days of recuperation. But her consciousness gradually woke up and she slowly opened her eyes. When she woke up and saw the sky full of stars and the dark starry sky, she immediately understood her situation. She turned her head with difficulty and saw her mother, Bailey Ningsu, looking at her with a complicated expression. "Mother," Yun Yao called out in a hoarse and weak voice. Bailey Ningsu nodded and said with a calm expression, "Yao Yao, it's good that you're awake. Mother didn't expect that you would do such a ridiculous thing to save that young man without caring about your own life. Mother wasn't wrong. You've been bewitched and have lost your rationality." Bailey Ningsu clearly had a lingering fear and was shocked by Yun Yao's change. Seeing Yun Yao looking at her in silence, she said with an indifferent tone, "Yao Yao, Mother will lock you up here to prevent you from doing something even more ridiculous. Mother will only let you out when you change your mind. In the meantime, you should focus on recuperating and quietly reflecting on your mistakes. From now on, Mother will never allow you to see Ji Tianxing again. The two of you are destined to never have a happy ending. Just forget about him." After saying that, Bailey Ningsu cast a spell and left the array. In the dark starry sky, Yun Yao was left alone, quietly lying in the array. When Bailey Ningsu said those words in a dignified tone, her eyes dimmed and a trace of regret gushed out from her heart. But she didn't say anything and silently endured everything. After a long time, she closed her eyes and whispered in a low voice, "Tianxing, perhaps we won't be able to meet again in the future. Although it's a pity, I don't regret it. Even if I had to do it all over again, I would still do it. As long as you can wake up and live well, I'll be satisfied." Even though her voice was soft, her tone was filled with determination and persistence. In tranquil sky, in the small wooden house on the mountain peak, Ji Tianxing was still lying on the ice jade bed, motionless and silent. As time passed, the Nirvana divine crystal in the depths of his mind constantly released a mysterious power to heal his injuries. His injuries were quickly recovering, and the scarlet brilliance lingering around his body became more and more intense and dazzling. Soon, 3 days passed in the blink of an eye. His injuries were completely healed, and his soul finally returned to its place.
It was only now that the dazzling red light lingering around his body gradually converged back into his body.
In the evening, the red light completely faded away, and everything returned to normal. He gradually woke up and slowly opened his eyes. Eldest senior sister. Ji Tianxing couldn't help but blurt out these 3 words the moment he woke up. He sat up from the ice jade bed and looked around. He saw that the wooden house was empty, and Yun Yao wasn't in the house.
There was only a smear of dark red blood left on the dark brown floor.
Chapter 484. Ji Tianxing had been unconscious all this time. However, he knew that Yun Yao had taken out her Nirvana divine crystal and put it into his body. He could hear Yun Yao's voice and knew what she was doing, but he couldn't speak or stop her. Even though he didn't know how badly Yun Yao was injured, nor did he know how she was doing right now. However, he heard Bailey Ningsu's sorrowful cry and saw the bloodstains on the ground. His heart was filled with worry and anxiety. He just wanted to fly to Yun Yao's side immediately and see how she was doing.
At this moment, a graceful and elegant figure silently appeared at the door of the wooden house.
Ji Tianxing sensed her arrival and raised his head to look at her. When he saw the woman in a long brocade dress, he couldn't help but tremble and frown. In a trance, he thought he saw Yun Yao. After all, that woman looked too similar to Yun Yao. However, Ji Tianxing knew Yun Yao very well and could immediately tell that the woman wasn't Yun Yao. Her eyes and temperament were completely different from Yun Yao's.
Moreover, her eyes and aura were somewhat cold, as if she didn't come with good intentions.
Ji Tianxing immediately guessed her identity. She was Yun Yao's mother. He was silent for a moment before he stood up and bowed to Bailey Ningsu. However, he didn't say anything. He didn't know how to address Bailey Ningsu, nor did he know what else to say in this situation. Bailey Ningsu stood at the door and looked at him indifferently. She took the initiative to speak in a calm tone. "It's good that you're awake. Yao Yao didn't risk her life to save you in vain. However, since you're awake, it's time to leave." Bailey Ningsu ordered him to leave. Her tone was cold and indifferent. Ji Tianxing nodded and said calmly, "There's no need for Madame Yun to remind me. I will leave as soon as possible and won't disturb you any longer. However, before I leave, I want to see Yun Yao." The one he was most worried about was Yun Yao. If he couldn't see Yun Yao's injuries, he would feel uneasy.
However, before he could finish speaking, he was interrupted by Bailey Ningsu.
"No need. Yao Yao is in seclusion to heal her injuries and won't see you. Moreover, you're not related to my Cloud Spirit Palace, and you almost caused Yao Yao to lose her life. I'm already being very kind by not taking my anger out on you. From now on, you and Yun Yao will never see Yao Yao, and I won't allow her to see you again. If you know your place, then please behave yourself and don't bother her." Hearing Bailey Ningsu's words, Ji Tianxing immediately frowned. "Know my own place? Bother her?" He looked at Bailey Ningsu and said firmly, "Madam Yun, Yun Yao and I love each other and are willing to give up everything for each other. You've been through this before, so you should understand what it means to be connected, to share honor and disgrace, to live and die together. Moreover, you should know Yun Yao's nature better than I do. You should know that once she makes a choice, she won't change it. The same goes for me. Even if you try to stop me, you won't be able to change my feelings for Yun Yao." Bailey Ningsu raised her eyebrows and looked at Ji Tianxing coldly. She shook her head. "Ji Tianxing, it seems like you don't know your place. Moreover, you don't know enough about Cloud Spirit Palace. You don't know anything about the majesty and power of the imperial court. With your status, talent, and strength, you're not worthy of Yun Yao. You can't protect her, and you don't have the qualifications to be Cloud Spirit Palace's son-in-law. It's not that I'm looking down on you, but you don't have any outstanding qualities that are worthy of my respect." Although Bailey Ningsu's words were sharp and direct, Yun didn't back down. However, Ji Tianxing did not back down. His eyes were filled with determination and confidence as he said in a sonorous tone, "Madam Yun, everyone will grow and become stronger. I'm only 17 years old today. I don't have the qualifications to be Yun Yao's son-in-law. However, what about 1 year, 2 years, or 3 years from now? Can you see the future? Can you see my strength and situation at that time? I'm confident that I can become a powerhouse in a short year. It'll prove my talent and potential. Even if it's your favorite son of heaven, Long Yunxiao, I can defeat him with my own hands. Bailey Ningsu couldn't help but frown when she saw how confident he was. A playful smile appeared on her face. She said indifferently, "You're indeed young and frivolous. Overconfidence has turned into arrogance." Ji Tianxing didn't back down. He said with equal harshness, "Since Madame Yun doesn't believe me, why don't you wait for a year and see the result? As long as Yun Yao has me in her heart, I will never give up. No matter if it's a bottomless abyss or a mountain of swords or a sea of flames, I will never turn back even if my body is crushed." Bailey Ningsu stared at him. She raised her eyebrows and a strange light flashed in her eyes. She nodded slightly and said earnestly, "I have to admit that you've made me look at you with a whole new level of respect. Since you're so confident, I'll give you a glimmer of hope and show you a clear path. The Monarch Mansion is the best academy in the Central State. It's also the strongest martial arts holy land in the profound Sky continent. If you're really a hidden dragon, then you can enter the Monarch Mansion with your talent and strength. As long as you can become a disciple of the Monarch Mansion, you'll be famous in the profound Sky continent and have the chance to become a transcendent. If you can successfully enter the Monarch Mansion, I won't stop you from being with Yun Yao." Ji Tianxing had never heard of the Monarch Mansion and didn't know how strong this martial arts holy land was. But after he heard Bailey Ningsu's words, he said without hesitation, "Thank you for your guidance, Madame Yun. Since that's the case, then it's settled. I will definitely enter the Monarch Mansion and prove my talent and strength. Please wait and see." Bailey Ningsu looked at him deeply and nodded. "Ji Tianxing, remember your words today." After she finished speaking, she turned and left the wooden house. Her figure quickly disappeared into the transportation array. Ji Tianxing looked at her departing figure. He silently clenched his fists and walked out of the wooden house. Not long after, he left the tranquil sky and walked out of the Nebula Palace.
Under the lead of the guards, he passed through the heavily guarded and majestic palaces and arrived at the main gate of the Cloud Spirit Palace.
At this moment, the sun was setting in the west, shining a golden light on the square outside the main gate. Ji Tianxing stood in the middle of the resplendent square and looked back at the magnificent Cloud Spirit Palace. He muttered in his heart, "Cloud Spirit Palace, I'll be back." Then, he condensed a pair of golden wings with his Kenshin battle robe. Like a golden rock, he spread his wings and flew high into the sky. Not long after, his figure disappeared into the white sea of clouds. 25 chapters completed. Please reward me. Chapter 485. The Sky Pillar sect had just gone through a great calamity and was in the midst of rebuilding. Ji Tianxing was worried about the Sky Pillar sect, so he naturally had to go back. After leaving the Cloud Spirit Palace, he rode Qianyu and sped through the sky, flying all the way to the south. Along the way, Qianyu flew over thousands of mountains and rivers, crossing countless majestic cities. Ji Tianxing was high up in the sky, overlooking the mountains, rivers, and cities below. Only then did he see the bustling scene of the Central Plains. The Central Plains had beautiful mountains and rivers, abundant spirit qi, and abundant resources. One ancient city after another, each with a history of hundreds to thousands of years, lay quietly between heaven and earth, exuding an ancient and vigorous aura. In the huge cities, rows upon rows of palaces and buildings could be clearly seen, as well as bustling crowds and martial artists of all shapes and sizes. Many martial practitioners with imposing appearances were riding strange spirit beasts or birds, shuttling back and forth between the cities. Even if those people flew across the sky on spirit beasts and brushed past Ji Tianxing, they would not take a second look at him. In the 9 regions of the southern continent, those at the Yuandan realm could be called experts. However, in the Central Plains, those at the Yuandan realm could only be called experts. Only those at the Heavenly Origin realm could be called martial arts experts. After all, the Central Plains was the sacred land of martial arts in the Tianxian continent. This place had the most abundant spirit qi and resources, as well as the most elite martial arts and secret technique inheritances. There were as many experts as there were clouds in the Central Plains. True geniuses came forth in large numbers, and heroes competed for supremacy. Qian Yu flew for nearly 20 days before leaving the Central Plains. In these 20 days, Ji Tianqing crossed hundreds of thousands of miles of mountains and rivers and thousands of cities. He had a preliminary understanding of the Central Plains and increased his experience and knowledge. He deeply felt the vastness and prosperity of the Central Plains, and saw a wider world. He secretly made up his mind to enter the Central Plains as soon as possible and establish a foothold here. Only in the Central Plains could he broaden his horizons and pursue a higher level of martial arts. The Central Plains, the sacred land where geniuses gathered, was a more splendid stage. Qian Yu flew for another 10 days and finally carried Ji Tianqing back to the Star Ancient Realm in the Tianshan region. 2.5 months had passed since that shocking battle. The haze and influence of the war had gradually dissipated, and the situation in the Star Ancient Realm had stabilized. Of the original 8 great sects, only 4 were left. The Tianjin sect, the Thousand Autumns sect, the True Martial sect, and the Windfire sect had all fallen apart. The power structure of the ancient star realm had been reshuffled, and the other 4 sects had seized the opportunity to occupy a large number of spirit veins and treasured lands. Not long after, Ji Tianqing returned to the Sky Pillar sect. He rode Qian Yu and flew above the Sky Pillar sect, looking down at everything within 100 miles. They saw that the Sky Pillar sect, which was originally in ruins, had taken on a new look. More than half of Heaven Raising Peak, Great Peace Peak, Jade Sword Peak, and Twin Moon Peak had been destroyed in that great battle. Now the elders and disciples of the Sky Pillar sect worked together and spent 2 months to restore the 4 mountains to their original state. Row upon row of brand new palaces sat on the 4 mountains, reflecting dazzling golden light under the afternoon sun. When the Demon Emperor had broken the seal, the entire Scarlet Firmament Peak had collapsed and turned into ruins. After the Scarlet Firmament Peak disappeared, the Spirit Vein Formation was also completely destroyed, leaving behind a huge pit with a radius of 20 miles in the ruins. Now, the abyss-like pit had long been filled in. The elders and thousands of disciples of the Sky Pillar sect spent a lot of effort to move a 1,000-meter-tall mountain and turn it into a brand new Scarlet Firmament Peak. The 9 mountains were still intact and arranged according to their original positions. Although the 9 Dragon Spirit Vein Formation had not been repaired yet, the world's spirit energy was slowly recovering. The sky was blue and the sun was warm. The world's spirit energy was abundant, and the 9 mountains exuded a majestic aura. After the war, the Sky Pillar sect had mostly returned to its original state. It did not look much different from before the war. The disciples of the Sky Pillar sect had also recovered their vitality. They were either busy repairing the sect's buildings or cultivating. Everything had returned to normal. The Sky Pillar sect had already walked out of the haze of the Great Calamity. Ji Tianqing landed on the Scarlet Firmament Peak and landed on the square in front of the palace that had just been built. There were many disciples in the square. Under the leadership of several deacons, they were busy building the buildings around the square and planting some spirit trees and trees. When Ji Tianqing descended from the sky, everyone raised their heads to look at him. Their faces revealed pleasant surprise as they cheered. It's Senior Brother Tianqing. Senior Brother Tianqing is back. That's great. I knew that Senior Brother Tianqing's luck was great. Nothing will happen to him. Senior Brother Tianqing. Our great hero is back. Not only were the dozens of disciples cheering in joy, even the deacons had gathered around with faces full of excitement. In a moment, everyone rushed into the square and surrounded Ji Tianqing. The scene of the sect suffering a great calamity and Ji Tianqing facing off against the Demon Emperor was deeply imprinted in everyone's minds, making it unforgettable for the rest of their lives. The surviving disciples of the Sky Pillar sect all remembered his indomitable aura and his valiant and heroic figure. From that moment on, almost all the disciples regarded him as their idol, a goal to learn from and emulate for the rest of their lives. In the 2 months after the end of the Great Battle, everyone learned that Ji Tianqing was seriously injured and on the verge of death. Everyone felt pained and worried. They silently prayed for him, hoping that he could wake up and recover soon. Now that the disciples saw that Ji Tianqing was safe and sound, their faces were flushed with excitement. Everyone crowded around him, talking and greeting him. Their voices were all very excited. Senior Brother Tianqing, the scene of you fighting against the Demon Emperor is really unforgettable for the rest of my life. It's not just unforgettable for the rest of your life. The battle between Senior Brother Tianqing and the Demon Emperor was simply earth-shattering and earth-shattering. Senior Brother Tianqing, you're simply too mighty. just like a god descending to the mortal world. There were also two deacons who said excitedly, Tianqing, not only are you a great contributor to our Sky Pillar sect, but you're also a great hero who saved the Heavenly Stellar Ancient Realm and the Heavenly Stellar region. Previously, the Grand Elder proposed to erect a statue for you in the sect to engrave your contributions and deeds for future generations to admire and worship. This matter has received the approval of all the elders and deacons. All the disciples of the sect have also expressed their support.
Look, that's the statue that the sect erected for you.
Ji Tianqing looked in the direction that the deacon was pointing and saw a huge statue that was 100 meters tall at the edge of the square. Yesterday's outburst was too tiring. Little he had only slept for 4 to 5 hours for several days. His body could not take it anymore. Today, I'll update 5 chapters at once. At night, I'll update 1 or 2 chapters. Thank you for your understanding and support. Chapter 486. It was obvious that the statue had been built not long ago. It looked brand new and was shrouded in the golden sunlight. It looked holy and majestic. It was a lifelike statue, and its figure and appearance were basically the same as Ji Tianqing's. It was a sculpture of him fighting against the Devil Emperor. He stood at the edge of the square, facing the cliff. His eyes were fixed on the sea of clouds in front of him. He looked resolute and determined. His left hand was pointing to the ground. His right hand was raised and his palm was pointing to the sky. He was releasing his most powerful killing move. Anyone who saw this magnificent statue would be able to feel the unparalleled domineering aura, as well as the bravery and heroism of risking one's life without regard for one's safety. Ji Tianqing stared at the statue and sized it up.
A hint of a smile could not help but flash in his eyes as he muttered to himself. Senior Xiong is really something.
He actually did this kind of false reputation thing. The two deacons smiled and said, Tianqing, this is not for the sake of fame. This is the honor you deserve. Back then, you stepped forward bravely at the critical moment and fought against the Devil Emperor fearlessly. How heroic and impassioned you were back then. We all think that a statue of you is not enough. The Grand Elder said that the Grand Elder should record that battle and your deeds in the history books. He wants your name to go down in history. Go down in history? Ji Tianqing did not know whether to laugh or cry. These words sounded a little awkward. After all, he was still alive and well. Then, Ji Tianqing exchanged some pleasantries with the others. Then, he walked through the square and entered the new towering sky hall. The new towering sky hall was basically the same as the old one. Ji Tianqing entered the hall and saw that there was only one person in the empty hall. It was Xiang Wuji. Xiang Wuji was sitting in front of a table, reading books and scrolls. Apparently, he was dealing with the affairs of the sect. There were dozens of reports, letters, and scrolls on the table, waiting for him to read and deal with. Ji Tianqing understood with a single glance that in these 2 months, Xiang Wuji had to preside over the overall situation of the sect and must be extremely busy. Old Master, I'm back. He smiled and greeted Xiang Wuji. Xiang Wuji was deep in thought as he held a memorial in his hands. When he heard the voice, his body trembled. He suddenly raised his head and saw Ji Tianqing standing in the middle of the hall, looking at him with a smile. He immediately stood up, his face full of excitement as he said with a joyful tone, Tianqing, why did you come back? As he spoke, Xiang Wuji quickly walked in front of Ji Tianqing and sized him up with bright eyes. Ha ha ha, your injuries and strength have all recovered. That's great. I've said it before. You brat, you're blessed with good fortune. You'll definitely be able to turn danger into safety and overcome this crisis. With that, Xiang Wuji pulled Ji Tianqing to a seat and impatiently asked, Tianqing, quickly tell this old man, how did your injuries recover so quickly? Was it the Transcendent from Cloud Soul Palace who saved you? Where's Yun Yao? Did she come back with you? Other than Yun Yao and Ji Ku, the happiest person to see Ji Tianqing fully recovered was Xiang Wuji. He was filled with joy and excitement as he asked a bunch of questions. Ji Tianqing nodded slightly and said with a complicated tone, Old Master, this is a long story. Let me tell you slowly. Then, he briefly recounted what had happened in Cloud Soul Palace. Xiang Wuji listened quietly. The smile on his face gradually disappeared and his mood became heavy. After a moment of silence, he could not help but let out a long sigh. Sigh, I didn't expect this to be so complicated. Cloud Soul Palace is a mysterious and powerful family. They have a high status and a strong foundation. It's normal that they don't want to save you. Yun Yao, on the other hand, looks cold but has a strong personality. I can't believe she would make such a sacrifice for you. Brat, you and Yun Yao are in love. That's a great blessing. You can't let her down in this life. Ji Tianxing did not say anything. He only nodded silently. Xiang Wuji understood that he was a good man who valued friendship and loyalty. He did not say anything else and talked about another matter. Tianxing, it's been more than 2 months since the end of the war. In these 2 months, thousands of disciples, elders, and deacons have completed the task of rebuilding the sect. Now, we just have to wait for your master to come out of seclusion. Then, we can work together to repair the spirit vein formation. After the sect reactivates the spirit vein formation, it will take at most a few years to recover. Yesterday, I ordered the elders to start recruiting a large number of servants and new disciples. Moreover, after the Heavenly Sword sect and the Thousand Autumns sect were annihilated, a large amount of spirit veins and precious lands were emptied out, and the various elders are constantly occupying them. Ji Tianxing was relieved after listening to Xiang Wuji talk about the Sky Pillar sect's recent situation and the following arrangements. He nodded and said, Master is still recuperating in seclusion. You have to worry about these trivial and complicated matters. I'm afraid you'll be busy for a long time. Xiang Wuji waved his hand and said with a solemn expression, Although I'm busy dealing with the sect's affairs, it's nothing. I'm old but strong, so I can still handle it. However, I'm still worried about something. I feel a little uneasy. Ji Tianxing frowned and asked doubtfully, What is it? Is it related to the Demon Emperor? Xiang Wuji nodded and said, That's right. Although you seriously injured the Demon Emperor and forced it to flee, there's been no news of it. In the past 2 months, there has been no news from the Devil Emperor. He hasn't caused any trouble, but this old man reckons that he is in seclusion to recuperate. I can't help but worry that the Demon Emperor might make a comeback after it recovers. Our sect has experienced a great calamity and its vitality has been greatly damaged. If the Demon Emperor comes back, our sect won't be able to withstand it. Furthermore, not only will the Star Ancient Realm encounter a great calamity, but the Heavenly Stellar region and the Southern Continent's 9 regions might also be plunged into misery and suffering. Ji Tianxing nodded with a solemn expression and said, Your worry is very reasonable. The Demon Emperor's strength at its peak was indeed terrifyingly powerful. Even if it only recovered 30% to 40% of its power, no one in the entire Southern Continent's 9 regions can resist it. In my opinion, only the Central Continent's Imperial Court can send powerhouses to resist or eliminate the Demon Emperor and prevent it from bringing disaster to the world. Imperial Court. Xiang Wuji hesitated for a moment before saying with a bitter smile, Back then, before the great calamity arrived, the Imperial Court sent the Son of Heaven to preside over the overall situation. It's a pity that the Son of Heaven was also helpless about the Heavenly Stellar region situation, and was even more powerless to stop the Fiend race's conspiracy. Now that the great calamity is over, it's even more impossible for the Imperial Court to send powerhouses to help. I reckon that the Imperial Court will only send people to search for the Demon Emperor's whereabouts and launch a pursuit. But the Demon Emperor is hiding in the dark, and we're all in the open. It's really impossible to guard against it. Chapter 487. As long as the Demon King was not eliminated, the Sky-bearing sect and the Tianqian region would not be at peace. This hidden danger had to be resolved as soon as possible. Ji Tianxing and Xiang Wuji both understood this point, but there was nothing they could do about it. They could not find the Demon King, nor did they have enough strength to eliminate the Demon King. At this point, the two of them fell silent, their hearts heavy. After a while, Xiang Wuji sighed and said helplessly, A transcendent expert like the Demon King is not someone the human forces of the 9 regions of the Southern Land can fight against. We can only pray that the Demon King does not come back for revenge, and that the Imperial Court can eliminate him as soon as possible, or the experts of our race in the Monarch Mansion can eliminate him for the people. Ji Tianxing frowned when he heard the name Monarch Mansion. Old Master, you also know about the Monarch Mansion? Can you tell me more about it? Xiang Wuji looked at him with surprise and explained, The Monarch Mansion is the most mysterious school and martial arts holy land in the Tianqian continent. The top geniuses of all races aim to enter the Monarch Mansion. I have roamed the continent for 200 years. How can I not know about the Monarch Mansion? But you, kid, you have only stayed in the Central State for a few days. How do you know about the Monarch Mansion? Ji Tianqing explained calmly, when I left the Cloud Soul Palace, I made an agreement with Yun Yao's mother, Madame Yun. When I enter the monarch mansion, I can prove my talent and strength, and have the right to be with Yun Yao. At that time, Madame Yun will not stop me and Yun Yao. Only then did Xiang Wuji come to a realization and said with a nod, so that's how it is. With the power and status of the Cloud Soul Palace, only the geniuses of the monarch mansion are qualified to be the son-in-law of the Cloud Soul Palace. Although Madame Yun looks down on people, it is understandable. Tianqing, you don't have to be so calculative with her. Also, I believe that with your talent, it won't be too difficult to enter the monarch mansion. Ji Tianqing nodded. Since I have made an agreement with Madame Yun, I will not go back on my words. No matter how powerful the monarch mansion is or how difficult it is to enter, I will not give up. Xiang Wuji saw the determination on his face and the determination in his voice. He nodded and praised, good. You should have this kind of ambition and confidence, kid. Moreover, this old man also approves of you entering the monarch residence to study. That was the top martial arts holy land on the continent. A mysterious force that even the imperial courts of various races feared. For thousands of years, the imperial residents had nurtured countless transcendents. They were all extraordinary characters whose names shook the continent. Tianqing, if you can enter the royal palace, you will have a chance to reach the transcendent stage. Whether it's for your martial arts future or for Yun Yao, you have to work harder and strive to enter the monarch mansion as soon as possible. Ji Tianqing memorized Xiang Wuji's words and nodded. I understand, I will definitely enter the monarch mansion. Xiang Wuji thought for a while and said, Tianqing, our sect has a treasure called the Destined Star Map. Your master once used that treasure to deduce the heavens and predict the future. He predicted that you would be the nemesis of the Devil Emperor. If the imperial court cannot kill the Devil Emperor as soon as possible, the heavy responsibility of killing the Devil Emperor will fall on your shoulders. Although you are not strong enough now, you have the Kenshin bloodline. One day, you will become a transcendent and kill the Devil Emperor. If you stay in our sect, you will only be able to reach the heaven stage. You will not be able to surpass the celestial stage. Therefore, after a while, you will leave for the middle state and find a way to enter the monarch mansion. Only in the monarch mansion will you be able to grow faster and become a transcendent. You will be able to kill the Devil Emperor. Xiang Wuji's eyes were filled with anticipation and his tone was solemn. Clearly, he had high hopes for Ji Tianqing. Ji Tianqing of course understood this. He nodded and said in a serious tone, Don't worry, old man. I will not let you down. Only then did Xiang Wuji reveal a trace of a smile and said in an amiable tone, All right, you just came back from the central continent and must be tired from the long journey. Quickly go and rest. Ji Tianqing got up and bid farewell. He left the sky-raising palace. He had just returned to his residence and was about to rest when someone came to visit him. He got up and opened the door to see a cute girl standing outside. It was Jiku. Jiku was a little excited, and her eyebrows were full of joy. When she saw Ji Tianqing, she couldn't help but cry out in surprise. Big brother Tianqing. You're really back. I heard from the other disciples that you're back. I didn't dare to believe it and thought they were lying to me. I didn't think you would recover so quickly. This is great. You're finally fine. This is great. Perhaps because she was too excited, Jiku actually cried tears of joy. Her clear eyes were filled with tears. Seeing her reaction, Ji Tianqing revealed a gentle smile and reached out to wipe away the tears at the corner of her eyes. Cuckoo, don't cry. I'm fine now. NN. Jiku nodded. She wiped away the tears in her eyes and an excited smile appeared on her face. Then, Ji Tianqing led her into the house. The two of them sat down, and only then did they start chatting freely. Brother Tianqing, you don't know how worried I was when you were in a coma for the past few days. I was so scared that you wouldn't wake up and never see me again. Jiku looked at Ji Tianqing with fear in her eyes. Ji Tianqing smiled and comforted her with a few words. He also thanked her for taking care of him during those days. The two of them chatted for a while before someone came to visit. It was Yan Er. He had heard the news from the disciples and came to visit with excitement. Over the past 2 months Yan Er had been thinking about Ji Tianqing. He had been worried and praying for him. After entering the house, when he saw that Ji Tianqing was safe and sound, his face was full of excitement. Ji Tianqing chatted with Yan Er for a while and comforted him. Only then did he calm down.
Then, the three of them chatted in the room and talked about the recent events in the Star Ancient Realm. After that great calamity, the power of the Star Ancient Realm had been reduced by half and the structure had been reorganized. The Tianjin sect, Thousand Autumns sect, and the other three sects had fallen apart and were destroyed. After listening to Jiku and Yen Er's narration, Ji Tianqing found out that the surviving members of the four sects had internal strife and caused many jokes and absurd things. When talking about the destruction of the four sects, the three of them still had lingering hatred and cursed that the four sects deserved it. After the three of them finished talking about the various sects, the topic returned to the Sky Pillar sect. Jiku and Yen were very pleased with the progress of the Sky Pillar sect's recovery and reconstruction in the past 2 months. The two of them pulled Ji Tianqing out of the room and wanted to take him to see the changes in the Sky Pillar sect. Of course, Ji Tianqing readily accepted the good advice and did not refuse. Chapter 488. When Ji Tianqing had returned to the Sky Pillar sect, he had overlooked the sect's situation from high up in the sky. At that time, he only saw the 9 mountain peaks reappearing and the sect returning to its original state. Now he had walked around the various mountain peaks and found that the spirit qi in the sect was weak. It was still somewhat desolate and dilapidated. Some forests and herb gardens had been destroyed and were still bare. They could not be restored in a short period of time. Many palaces and buildings were damaged, but only the houses were repaired and the protective array of the palaces and buildings had not been set up. Even the inner and outer sect disciples only had temporary residences. They did not have a secret room for cultivation, nor did they have sufficient cultivation resources. In short, it would take a long time for the Sky Pillar sect to recover. Ji Tianqing, Jiku, and Yen chatted for a long time and finally talked about Yun Yao. Yen looked at him with some doubt and asked with concern, "Senior brother Tianqing, why didn't senior sister come back with you? Will she never come back here again after she goes home?" Jiku was also very concerned about this issue and asked, "Brother Tianqing, senior sister brought you back to Zhongzhou to find a way to treat your injuries. Now that you have recovered and returned to the sect, senior sister did not come back. Could it be that there was some unforeseen event?" Ji Tianqing was silent for a moment before he explained to the two of them. After Jiku and Yen heard his words, their expressions and emotions became a little complicated. Yen pursed her lips tightly. Her eyes were filled with confusion and anger. She said in a deep voice, "That Cloud Spirit Palace is too unreasonable. It's really hateful. Senior brother Tianqing, you and senior sister are so in love. You are simply a golden couple, a match made in heaven. You can do anything for each other, even risking your lives to protect each other, just like my father and mother. Why does that hateful Cloud Spirit Palace want to stop you two from being together?" Jika's mood became even more complicated. She lowered her head slightly, not daring to look at Ji Tianqing's eyes. She was silent, but she thought to herself, "In the past, I always thought that I was the one who loved brother Tianqing the most and that I would definitely be with him. Who would have thought that eldest senior sister, who looked cold and arrogant, would have such a strong personality? Grand senior sister was deeply in love with big brother Tianqing. She was willing to sacrifice her life to save him. It's a pity that I'm too weak to help big brother Tianqing. However, I also love big brother Tianqing deeply. I'm willing to risk my life for him." Ji Tianqing saw that the atmosphere was a little tense, so he calmly comforted Jiku and Yen "The two of you don't have to be so angry, and you don't have to worry about me and eldest senior sister. How could a powerful force like Cloud Soul Palace easily accept a nobody like me? However, being unknown is only temporary. I will soon set foot in Central Continent and fulfill my promise. It won't be long before I'll make Cloud Soul Palace look at me in a different light and make them stop obstructing me and eldest senior sister." Hearing this, Jiku and Yen both looked at him in confusion. "Senior brother Tianqing, are you going to Central State?" "Big brother Tianqing, why are you going to Central State?" Ji Tianqing said solemnly, "In a few days, I'll go to Central State and find a way to enter the Imperial Residence. Only by entering the Imperial Residence can I be recognized by Cloud Soul Palace and be worthy of eldest senior sister. The Imperial Residence is the most mysterious and powerful holy land of martial arts in Central State. Only the top geniuses of various clans." After listening to his explanation, Jiku and Yen understood the whole story. Jiku said without hesitation, "Big brother Tianqing, I want to go to Central State with you.
No matter where you go, I'll go with you. Ji Tianqing frowned slightly and was about to dissuade him. At this time Yan also hurriedly said, Senior brother Tianqing, you can't leave me alone. I want to go to Central State with you. Ji Tianqing didn't know whether to laugh or cry. He reached out and touched Yan Er's head and asked, Yan Er, I'm going to Central State to fulfill my promise and clear my name. Why are you going to Central State with me? Do you also want to enter the imperial residence? Yan looked up at him with innocent eyes and asked doubtfully, Can't I? Central State is so prosperous, and the imperial residence is a holy land of martial arts. Of course I want to go and experience it and pursue a more profound martial arts realm. Ji Tianqing was startled for a moment. Only then did he remember that Yan was not only the crown prince of the Fire Clan, but also had 2 heavenly bloodlines. With Yan Er's talent to reach the origin core realm at the age of 11, he was also a rare top genius. If he wanted to enter the imperial residence, it shouldn't be too difficult. Thinking of this, Ji Tianqing couldn't help but chuckle. I forgot that Yan you are the #1 genius of our sect. It won't be difficult for you to enter the imperial residence. However, your parents entrusted you to master and let you cultivate in the sky-bearing sect. If you want to go to Central State, you can't make the decision on your own. You have to report to master and your parents first and ask for their permission. Yan pursed his lips and nodded. Okay, then I'll send a message to my parents later and ask for their opinion first. As for master, I can only wait for him to finish healing and then report to him. And that's right. Ji Tianqing nodded with a smile and looked at Ji Ku again. Cuckoo, although Central State is prosperous and the martial arts realm is prosperous, there are various forces mixed in and it will be more dangerous. I have a reason to go to Central State, but I don't want you to take risks with me. It will be safer for you to stay in the sky-bearing sect. Ji Ku didn't listen to his dissuasion. She looked at him firmly and said in an unquestionable tone, Big brother Tianqing, Ku can listen to you about anything except this. From the day I left the Clear Sky Empire with you, I have already sworn in my heart that I will follow you for the rest of my life. No matter where you go, I will follow you. Even if it is a mountain of swords and a sea of flames, I will not shrink back. Ji Tianqing looked at her persistent eyes and didn't know how to persuade her for a while. Ji Ku continued, Big brother Tianqing, I know myself. With my talent, I may not be able to enter the Monarch Mansion. However, I don't have extravagant hopes of entering the Monarch Mansion, nor do I want to become a top genius. I just want to go to Central State with you. I'm satisfied to be able to accompany you. Since Ji Ku had already said so, what else could Ji Tianqing say? He could only nod with complicated feelings and said, Cuckoo, since you have made up your mind, I won't persuade you anymore. Don't worry, I won't leave you alone. When I leave, I will definitely take you with me to Central State. Seeing that he finally agreed, Ji Ku's face was full of smiles and her heart was filled with joy. Regarding the matter of going to Central State, the 3 of them decided. Not long after, the 3 of them bid farewell to each other and returned to their respective residences. Ji Tianqing entered the secret chamber to recuperate while Yan quickly sent a message to the Fire Emperor and Fire Empress to ask for their opinion. Chapter 489. Soon, 5 days had passed. During these 5 days, Ji Tianqing had been recuperating in the secret room. Since he had fused with the Nirvana Divine Crystal, his injuries and strength had completely recovered. Moreover, his soul had become even stronger, and his soul energy was surging, causing his mind and spiritual sense to become even stronger. The spiritual sense of an ordinary 9th-level origin core martial artist could only explore an area of 90 meters. His soul energy was even stronger, and the range of his spiritual sense was twice as much as a martial artist of the same level. Most importantly, the battle with the Devil Emperor and the experience of his soul being separated from his body had stimulated an even stronger potential. His strength had imperceptibly increased, and he was getting closer and closer to the Heaven Origin stage. However, the shackle between the Origin Core stage and the Heaven Origin stage was a hurdle that countless martial artists were unable to cross. Ji Tianqing was unable to determine when he would be able to break through the shackle and advance to the Heaven Origin stage. He guessed in his heart that he might need an opportunity to advance to the Heaven Origin stage. This morning, his essence, energy, and spirit had all recovered to their peak state, so he finished recuperating and walked out of the secret room.
He had just walked out of the secret room when the black-robed guard guarding outside respectfully reported a piece of news.
Tianqing, Lord Sect Master has already come out of seclusion last night.
Lord Sect Master has instructed you to go to the study to see him after you come out of seclusion.
Suddenly hearing this news, Tianqing was stunned for a moment, and a trace of surprise flashed through his eyes. Master has only been in seclusion for 3 months, and he actually came out of seclusion so quickly? Could it be that his injuries have already healed? That's great! He felt puzzled in his heart, but he also felt gratified and excited. Presently, the Sky Pillar Sect situation was not stable yet, and they were extremely short on manpower. It was difficult to support it with just Xiang Wuji alone. If Tianqing's injuries were healed, he would be able to regain the authority of the sect master and manage the various affairs of the sect. That was naturally excellent. Tianqing hurriedly left the secret room and quickly rushed to the study in Sky Pillar Hall. After a short while, he entered the spacious, bright, clean, and elegant study and saw Tianqing, whom he had not seen for a long time.
Tianqing, wearing a golden robe, was sitting at his desk, reading through the papers, concentrating on handling the affairs of the sect.
His face was still a little pale, as if he had just recovered from a serious illness. His eyes were also a little dim, not as sharp and dignified as before. Furthermore, he still had a head full of white hair. Tianqing stepped into the study and cupped his hands in salute. Disciple pays respect to master. When Tianqing heard his voice, he quickly put down the things in his hands and turned his head to look at him. Tianqing, come in quickly. Master has been waiting for you for a long time. Tianqing smiled amiably and waved at him. Tianqing walked to the desk and asked with concern, Xueqi, why did you come out early? Have your injuries healed? Tianqing lightly shook his head, his tone calm as he said, while your master was in seclusion healing in the immortal cave, I was worried about our sect's safety, so after stabilizing my injuries, I came out of seclusion ahead of time. Although your master's injuries haven't healed completely, it's not a big problem. After another year of recuperation, I'll be completely healed. After saying this, he looked at Tianqing with shining eyes, his face full of praise.
I didn't think that in the 3 months that your master was in seclusion, our sect would encounter such a monstrous calamity.
If you hadn't turned the tide and forced the demon emperor to retreat, our sect would have been annihilated a long time ago. Tianqing, your performance was just too shocking. Your master can't believe it. Obviously, after Tianqing came out of seclusion, he had already understood what had happened. His pale face was full of smiles, his eyes full of gratification and pride. Tianqing said calmly, Xueqi, those things are already in the past. Moreover, it wasn't just me who forced the demon emperor to retreat. Hundreds of people in our sect worked together to seriously injure the demon emperor, forcing him to flee. Tianqing raised his hand to interrupt him, his voice firm. Tianqing, you don't need to be humble.
You are the hero who saved our sect and the heavenly stellar region. After pausing for a moment, he continued, after your master came out of seclusion, I already talked to the Grand Elder.
I also know that you were seriously injured and on the verge of death. Yunyao brought you back to Cloud Soul Palace.
I heard the Grand Elder say that you are preparing to head to Central State and enter the Monarch Palace?
Tianqing nodded. Xueqi, I was just about to report this to you and ask for your opinion. Tianqing smiled. You have a reason to go to the Monarch Palace, so why would your master stop you? Moreover, if you enter the Monarch Palace, not only will you have a brighter future, you will also gain the recognition of Cloud Soul Palace. Your master and the Grand Elder have the same thoughts. We both support your decision to head to Central State and enter the Monarch Palace. Thank you Xueqi for your help. Tianqing cupped his hands and bowed. Tianqing waved his hand, indicating that he didn't need to be so polite. He said with some emotion, back then, your master used the star map to predict that our sect would encounter a great calamity and your master would die. Therefore, your master made arrangements in advance, hoping to help you fight for a chance to survive. Your master only thought that even if the sect was destroyed and I died in the calamity, it was nothing. As long as you, Yunyao and Yan, could survive and head to Central State to grow and gain experience, you would have a chance to take revenge in the future. However, man proposes, God disposes. I didn't expect that as soon as your master's plan was carried out, the demon clan would assassinate me and I had to go into seclusion to heal. Not long after, The calamity broke out and the demon emperor also broke the seal. Ji Tianqing listened to Chu Tianqing's words and frowned in confusion. Xueqi, you had a plan to let us leave the sect and head to Central State? Chu Tianqing nodded. That's right. You should remember that your master once asked you to go to the Beast King Valley to deliver something to the Beast King. In fact, your master wanted to ask the Beast King to take care of you and ask him to go to Central State first to make preparations. After he is ready in Central State, your master will let you leave the sect and go to Central State to find him. Hearing this, Ji Tianqing came to a sudden realization. He finally understood. No wonder before the great calamity broke out, Xueqi asked me to go to the Beast King Valley to deliver something to the Beast King. It turns out that Xueqi had predicted that he would die in battle and that the Sky Pillar sect would be destroyed. Therefore, he had already made preparations and thought of a way out for us. Unfortunately, the development of things later exceeded Xueqi's expectations and control, so he couldn't carry out his plans smoothly. Ji Tianqing stared at Chu Tiansheng and asked, Xueqi, that senior Beast King. Is he still in Central State? Chu Tiansheng nodded and said, of course he is in Central State, and he is ready. In 2 days, you, Yan, Ji Ku, and the others will go to Central State to find the Beast King. You are very unfamiliar with Central State, so it will be inconvenient for you to do things. Only with the Beast King taking care of you can your master be at ease. Chapter 490. Ji Tianqing, Ji Ku, and Yan Er's trip to the Central State obtained Chu Tianqing's approval. This matter was put on the agenda. Chu Tianqing's meaning was to wait for 10 days before Ji Tianqing's group of 3 set off. Because before Ji Tianqing went to the Central State, the Sky Pillar sect still needed him to do something big. That was to restore and rebuild the 9 Dragon Spirit Vein Grand Formation. As long as the Grand Formation wasn't activated, the Sky Pillar sect wouldn't be safe, and the disciples would always feel uneasy in their hearts. Moreover, without the protection of the 9 Dragon Spirit Vein Grand Formation, the Sky Pillar sect's spirit energy was extremely thin. Ji Tianqing had considered this matter long ago. Since Chu Tiansheng brought it up first, he naturally wouldn't refuse. The master and disciple discussed for a moment before deciding to start the operation 2 days later. Ji Tianqing bid farewell to Chu Tiansheng and left the study. After returning to his residence, he entered the secret chamber to circulate his cultivation and continue comprehending the 8th level of the Sword Heart Tao. He had already stayed at the 9th level of the Origin Core stage for 3 months, yet there were no signs of breaking through to the Sky Origin stage. If he wanted to advance to the Sky Origin stage, there were only 2 paths he could take. One was to cultivate bitterly day and night, and use the method of dripping water to slowly break through the shackles of the Sky Origin stage. Or he could encounter some opportunity and obtain some good fortune and naturally reach the Sky Origin stage. However, opportunities and good fortune were illusory and unpredictable, and could only be encountered by chance and not sought. Ji Tianqing didn't expect to rely on good fortune to break through to the Sky Origin stage, as that was too unrealistic. What he could do was to cultivate diligently and allow his martial Dao foundation to be even more stable and his strength to be even more profound. Ji Tianqing sat upright in the secret chamber and concentrated on circulating his cultivation. He saw the spirit energy of heaven and earth from all directions surging over like flowing clouds and swiftly pouring into his body. His temperament was steady like a boulder, yet also like an abyss vortex that naturally devoured the spirit energy of heaven and earth and transformed it into boundless true essence in his body. Since he experienced the calamity of his body and soul being separated, his body had undergone a subtle change, and his aptitude and potential were even more perfect. His fleshly body was on the verge of collapse, but he came back from the dead. His reborn body was even more powerful than before. Both his strength and defense had doubled. Moreover, it was as transparent as a piece of spirit jade and was constantly absorbing the spiritual energy of heaven and earth. After his soul had been severely injured, it had healed, and after fusing with the Nirvana Divine Crystal, it had become even more powerful. Not only was his spiritual sense stronger than that of ordinary martial artists, but he could also directly communicate with and control the spirit chi of heaven and earth, which made his cultivation speed and absorption of spirit chi faster. The amount of heaven and earth spirit chi he absorbed in a single day of cultivation was equivalent to 5 days of cultivation for a martial artist of the same realm. Ji Tianqing understood that this was the legendary unity of heaven and man. Only Sky Origin stage cultivators could reach such a level of martial arts. The cultivation of martial arts was actually a process of strengthening the body,
exploring and comprehending the heaven and earth. When martial artists cultivated, absorbed heaven and earth spirit chi, set up great arrays and so on, they were all absorbing the energy of all things in the world. For martial artists who had yet to reach sky origin stage, it was a little troublesome to absorb the energy of heaven and earth. They needed to meditate and breathe, or even use arrays and elixirs, etc. However, sky origin stage martial artists were different. Their bodies had long been developed and strengthened to the limit, becoming perfect and transparent. They could naturally communicate with and absorb the heaven and earth spirit chi. When martial artists' bodies were in harmony with heaven and earth, they could freely absorb and control the heaven and earth spirit chi. This was the so-called unity of heaven and man. Ji Tianqing's strength had yet to reach sky origin stage. However, he had already reached the unity of heaven and man realm and had a perfect body comparable to a sky origin stage cultivator. This was simply a miracle. Compared to his previous experience of having his body and soul separated and almost losing his life, this could be considered a blessing in disguise. Very quickly, 2 days passed in the blink of an eye. After 2 days of cultivation, Ji Tianqing's strength had increased a little, and his skills had become more profound. He stopped cultivating, left the secret room, and rushed to the sky-raising palace. When he entered the sky-raising palace, Chu Tiansheng, Xiang Wuji, and a few other elders were already waiting in the main hall. Seeing him arrive, Chu Tiansheng said with a solemn expression, "Since everyone is here, I will announce an important matter. In the next few days, our sect will restore the spirit vein array and rebuild the 9 dragon spirit veins. This is related to our sect's 1,000 years of foundation, so we cannot afford to be careless or negligent. This time, the Grand Elder and Tianqing will work together to set up the spirit vein array. All the other elders will need to do their best to help." Hearing Chu Tianqing's order, the elders naturally hurriedly cupped their hands and bowed, indicating that they would obey. However, one of the elders hesitated and asked doubtfully, "Sect Master, we have all seen Tianqing's strength and battle prowess. However, our 9 dragon spirit vein array is a high-level sky origin array. It is very complicated and mysterious. Tianqing's strength has yet to reach sky origin stage. I'm afraid it will be difficult for him to take charge of the array." Chu Tianqing raised his eyebrows and revealed a playful smile. He explained, "Tianqing may not have reached sky origin stage, but his attainments in array Dao are already at the Grandmaster stage. Back then, it was he who broke the Dragon Mountain Ancient Tomb's protective array. That's a top-notch Tian Yuan Grand formation. Even I and the Grand Supreme Elder are helpless against it. Tianqing's attainments in array Dao have already surpassed mine. He can stand shoulder to shoulder with the Grand Elder. Is there anything wrong with letting him take part in setting up the array?" The elder immediately smiled embarrassedly and hurriedly cupped his hands and apologized. "Please forgive me, Sect Master. It was my negligence." Then, he cast an apologetic look at Ji Tianqing. Although Ji Tianqing was only the Sect Master's disciple, he was now the great hero who saved the sky-bearing sect in Tianquan region. All the elders in the sect were extremely respectful to him. At this time, Xiang Wuji spoke again. "I have already prepared all the materials needed to restore the spirit vein array. If no one has any objections, then let's start today." Then, everyone left the sky-bearing palace and began to set up the array. The spirit vein array was led by Xiang Wuji and Ji Tianqing, with Chu Tiansheng and the 7 elders assisting from the side. Ji Tianqing and Xiang Wuji flew to the sky above the red cloud peak. They stood in the sky with a serious expression, overlooking the entire sect. Chu Tiansheng and the 7 elders were scattered to the other 8 peaks to assist Ji Tianqing and Xiang Wuji. Not long after, Ji Tianqing and Xiang Wuji began to move. The 2 of them waved their hands and scattered thousands of spiritual crystals and gems. They placed them on the peaks according to the array's position, setting up the array's foundation. Then, the 2 of them continuously waved their palms, creating dazzling true essence flowers in the sky, connecting the 9 peaks with invisible veins. Chu Tiansheng and the 7 elders also became busy. They did their best to set up the array's foundation and stabilize the array's veins. Restoring and rebuilding the spirit vein array was an extremely complicated and vast project. Even with Ji Tianqing and Xiang Wuji's strength, it took them a total of 9 days and 9 nights to set up the spirit vein array successfully. After 9 days, the 2 of them had exhausted all their strength and were extremely tired and weak. Chu Tiansheng and the 7 elders were also mentally and physically exhausted, both physically and mentally.
Fortunately, the spirit vein array was successfully rebuilt. Soon, the 9-dragon spirit vein would be formed again, allowing the sky-bearing sect to quickly recover. Many brothers asked Little He about the martial realms in the book. Little He listed them out for everyone to take a look. There were 5 realms above the Heaven Origin Realm: Soul Refinement Realm, Essence Soul Realm, 9th Tribulation Realm, Martial Sage Realm, and Martial God Realm. Chapter 491. Ji Tianxing could finally leave with peace of mind now that the spirit vein grand formation had been rebuilt. He returned to the secret chamber and recuperated for 5 whole days. After 5 days, his strength had recovered to its peak state. Only then did he take Ji Ku and Yan and prepare to leave for the middle state. Early in the morning, Chu Tiansheng, Xiang Wuji, and a few other elders gathered at the top of the Crimson Cloud Peak to send them off. Even many deacons and disciples rushed over when they heard the news. They gathered at the square in front of the hall and waved their hands reluctantly. Before they left, Chu Tiansheng and Xiang Wuji gave Ji Tianxing and the others earnest advice. Tianxing, when you reach the middle state, you must protect yourself and learn more. Under the care of the Beast King, you must adapt to the environment of the middle state as soon as possible. The middle state is the holy land of martial arts. It is vast and filled with experts. For you, it is the most magnificent stage, but also the most difficult challenge. Don't be impatient. First, stand firm in the middle state, then slowly plan for the future. Even if you go to the middle state, don't forget about the Sky Pillar sect. You must remember that we will always be behind you and silently support you. This old man will wait for the day when you become famous and return with honor. Ji Tianxing, Ji Ku, and Yan remembered their advice. After a while, the 3 of them bowed to Chu Tiansheng and the others and left the Crimson Cloud Peak on their spirit beasts. Chu Tiansheng, Xiang Wuji, and the others stood at the square in front of the hall for a long time. Everyone looked on reluctantly as Ji Tianxing and the others disappeared into the horizon. Only then did they disperse. Qian Yu carried Ji Tianxing and Ji Ku and sped through the sky, heading north. Yan rode on the wildfire white tiger and sped through the mountains and rivers, following closely behind Qian Yu. Qian Yu and the white tiger traveled day and night, only stopping once every 3 days to rest and recover their strength. In this way, it would take them more than a month to reach the middle state from the Star Ancient Realm. Among the 3 of them, apart from Ji Tianxing, Ji Ku and Yan, had never been to Zhongzhou. They were filled with curiosity and yearning for the mysterious central continent, and their hearts were filled with longing. Of course, they had never left their homes and gone to such a faraway place, so they couldn't help but feel a little uneasy. However, when Ji Ku and Yan had such thoughts, their hearts would calm down as long as they saw Ji Tianxing's figure. Ji Tianxing's expression was calm and determined. His temperament was indifferent and calm, which always made them feel safe and at ease. As long as Ji Tianxing was by their side, they were fearless and full of hope for the future. Time flew by. Very quickly, 1.5 months had passed. Ji Tianxing and the other 2 had traveled for 45 days. They had passed through quite a few human territories and crossed thousands of mountains and rivers before they finally arrived at the central province. That evening, the sun was setting in the west. Qian Yu was flying high in the sky, and Ji Tianxing and Ji Ku were sitting cross-legged on its back. Both of them looked tired, and their brows were filled with exhaustion. Ji Tianxing was resting with his eyes closed, silently absorbing the spiritual energy of heaven and earth to recover his strength. Ji Ku opened her big clear eyes, looking down at the mountains and rivers below, admiring the magnificent scenery of the central province. At this time, she saw a vast and flat plain in front of her. On the vast and boundless land, a huge black city appeared. She looked down from the sky and saw that the city was very majestic and magnificent. She could feel the vigorous atmosphere blowing in her face. The huge city covered at least a few hundred miles in radius, and she couldn't see the end of it at a glance. The most peculiar thing was that the city was actually circular. During their journey, Ji Ku had seen many ancient cities of the central province. Those cities were all squarish and normal. As for the huge city in front of them, not only was it several times larger than a normal city, it was also circular in shape. Ji Ku looked at the huge city curiously and couldn't help but ask, "Big brother Tianxing, look at the city in front of us. It seems a little strange." Ji Tianxing, who was resting with his eyes closed, opened his eyes and looked forward calmly. When he saw the huge black city, a smile flashed across his eyes, and he said, It has a radius of 800 miles, and the city is huge and round. It symbolizes stability in all directions and benefits the four seas. Cuckoo, we have arrived. That is the #1 holy city in the profound sky continent, the Central Province City. When Xueqi heard this, her beautiful face immediately revealed a look of surprise and anticipation. So this is the legendary Central Province City, the gathering place of all the strong people in the world. No wonder I felt that the city was a little strange. It has a vigorous and ancient aura, leaving a deep impression. Ji Tianqing nodded and said calmly, Master said that the Beast King had arrived in the Central Province City a few months ago and had already prepared everything. After we enter the Central Province City, we will first find the Beast King and meet up with him. Not long after, Qianyu descended from the sky and landed in front of the 100-zhang tall southern city gate. Ji Tianqing, Ji Ku and Yan stood side by side on a straight and wide blue stone road, looking at the Central Province City in front of them. They saw that this ancient city with nearly 10,000 years of history quietly stood in the vast world. The black city wall was 100 zhang tall and was built with huge black stones. Its surface was covered with wind and frost carvings and the marks of time. Above the 100 zhang tall city gate, there were 3 simple and strong words carved on the stone wall of the city wall. Central Province City. The blue stone road under their feet extended all the way to the huge city gate. The 100-meter-wide city gate was guarded by dozens of black armored guards on both sides. Those guards had ramrod-straight figures, icy cold and indifferent expressions, and their entire bodies emitted a dignified and murderous aura. Ji Tianqing noticed with a few glances that the strengths of those black armored guards had all reached the 7th level of the profound convergence stage or above. The 2 captains of the guards that were dressed as captains had strengths that had reached the 5th level of the origin core stage. 5th level origin core stage martial artists could be called experts in the 9 regions of the southern continent. Whereas in the sacred land of martial arts, the Central Province, a 5th level origin core stage martial artist could only be called an expert and be a captain of the city guard. Of course, with these black armored guards guarding the city gate, the martial artists of the various clans that entered and left the Central Province City were all well behaved and would absolutely not dare cause trouble. Ji Tianqing, Ji Ku and Yan walked along the blue stone road towards the city gate. Although they brought along Qian Yu and the wildfire white tiger, these 2 spirit beasts had enormous figures that were extremely conspicuous. But the martial artists that entered and left the Central Province City mostly rode on spirit beasts. Those spirit beasts had all sorts of strange appearances, and there were all sorts of clans, causing them to be even more conspicuous. However, everyone had calm and indifferent expressions. Obviously, they'd long since become accustomed to it. After a short moment, Ji Tianqing's group of 3 passed through the city gate and entered the Central Province City. They walked on the wide and perfectly straight street and saw countless experts in the martial Dao, and there were also Xeno-race martial artists with strange appearances. On both sides of the street were row upon row of tall buildings and palaces, and there were also shops that were filled with a dazzling lineup and various strange places. Chapter 492. Ji Tianqing's group of 3 walked around the city as they observed their surroundings. It was truly an eye-opening experience. In this ancient and majestic city, not only were there many humans living here, there were also some demon race and water race martial artists. The 3 of them strolled around the city for an hour and saw many foreign race martial artists. On the surface, these foreign race martial artists looked somewhat similar to humans. However, their clothes clearly carried a rough and valiant foreign race aura, making it easy for people to distinguish them. Some of the demon race martial artists had hair of different colors. Their bodies were tall and sturdy, as thick and sturdy as wild beasts. They only wore animal skin aprons and waistcoats, revealing their thick hair and muscular limbs. There were also some water race martial artists. All of them had golden hair. Their eyes were blue in color, and their bodies were tall and slender. They also wore long robes or leather armor like humans, but if one looked carefully, they would find that their arms and necks were covered with a layer of fine scales. Ji Tianqing's group even saw the legendary dwarf race. Those sturdy dwarves, regardless of gender or age, were all less than half a meter tall. Most of them used short axes as weapons and liked to grow full beards, tying their beards into a dozen small braids. Ji Tianqing's group of 3 became more and more curious the more they looked. Every time they saw a foreign race, they would take a few more looks. However, all of this to the people of Central State City could not be more normal. When Yan and Ji Ku curiously stared at these foreign race cultivators, These foreign race cultivators didn't feel embarrassed or angry. There were even some foreign race martial artists who smiled at them, making them feel a little embarrassed. The three of them strolled around the city for an hour and were dazzled by all kinds of strange things. They had long been shocked to the point of numbness. Xueqi said with a heart full of joy, "Big brother Tianqing, Central State City is really as the legends say, strange and colorful, mysterious and vast. This place is too interesting." Tianqing nodded and said with a smile, "This is the holy land of martial arts in the profound sky continent. Naturally, martial artists of various races will gather here, as well as many martial arts experts. Once we find the Beast King and settle down in the city, you can wander around as much as you want. At that time, you will definitely discover more amazing people and things." Yen hurriedly nodded and said expectantly, "Well, then let's go find the Beast King." Tianqing didn't waste any more time. He brought Xueqi and Yen to the Fish Dragon Alley in South City. Before coming to Central State, Chu Tianqing had told him to go to Fish Dragon Alley's Cool Breeze courtyard to find the Beast King. The three of them had just arrived in Central State City, so they were very unfamiliar with the layout of the city. They spent about 2 hours asking the passers-by several times before they finally found the Fish Dragon Alley. The Fish Dragon Alley was located at the edge of the southern part of the city. It was not as bustling as the city. The surroundings of the alley were quiet and secluded. The stone path was clean and elegant, and the roadside was filled with tall spiritual trees, spiritual flowers, and spiritual herbs. Walking in the Fish Dragon Alley, one could only feel that the spiritual energy was abundant, and the environment was elegant, making one feel relaxed and happy. There were a total of 6 mansions on both sides of the Fish Dragon Alley that was more than 1.5 kilometers long. All of them were mansions that occupied a large area and had a magnificent aura. Moreover, Tianqing could see that every mansion was protected by the Heaven Origin Grand Formation that set up layers of restrictions and checkpoints. Even if there were no guards guarding the entrance of the mansion, nobody could easily enter the mansion. The Cool Breeze courtyard was located in the deepest part of the Fish Dragon Alley. This mansion was similar to the other 5 mansions. It occupied an area of 1,000 meters with a dignified aura, and the environment was quiet and secluded. When the three of them walked to the entrance of the Cool Breeze courtyard, they saw a human guard in a black robe at the entrance. The guard actually had a strength at the 3rd level of the Origin Core stage. His eyes were bright, and his aura was extremely valiant and cold. Tianqing walked to the entrance and talked to the black-robed guard, explaining his identity and the purpose of his visit. The black-robed guard asked for a moment before he entered the courtyard to report the news. After a short moment, a series of heavy footsteps sounded from the courtyard. Subsequently, a snow-white 6-armed white ape that was over 10 feet tall arrived at the entrance. When the 6-armed white ape saw Tianqing, it revealed a kind expression and nodded to him in greeting.
"Young man, we meet again."
Tianqing greeted it as well.
"White ape, I didn't expect you to come to Central State City as well."
"Yes, I'm not only the Beast King's disciple, but also his servant."
"Of course I have to follow him," the white ape explained.
"The entrance isn't a place to talk. Come in quickly. The Beast King has been waiting for you for a long time." Subsequently, the white ape led Tianqing and the other 2 into the Cool Breeze courtyard. The courtyard's environment was elegant. Not only did it have a garden and a small lake, but it also had pavilions, terraces, and waterside pavilions. It was rather elegant and otherworldly. The white ape led Tianqing and the other 2 through 2 courtyards and entered the last main courtyard.
The three of them waited in the guest hall for a moment before the Beast King rushed over to meet them after hearing the news.
The Beast King still looked the same as before. He was tall and thin, wore a white robe, and had gray hair and a long beard.
He had the demeanor of an otherworldly expert.
After entering the guest hall, he exchanged some pleasantries with Tianqing and the other 2 before taking a seat. The Beast King looked at Tianqing with bright eyes and said with a sigh, "Nephew Tianqing, your master has told this old man about what happened to the Sky Pillar sect in detail. This old man really didn't expect that the Sky Pillar sect would suffer such a calamity and almost be destroyed in the war. But what surprised this old man even more was that nephew actually grew up so quickly. When the sect encountered such a calamity, you were able to stand up and repel the demon emperor. This is simply inconceivable." Tianqing nodded with an indifferent expression and said in a calm voice, "Senior Beast King, this matter has already passed for several months, so there's no need to mention it. Now that the three of us have come to Central State, we hope that Senior can take care of us in the future.
The Beast King stroked his beard and said with an amiable smile, "Nephew is too polite. This old man and your master are life and death friends. Since he entrusted the three of you to this old man, how could this old man not do his best to take care of you?"
Ji Tianxing cupped his hands and said, "Since that's the case, I will have to trouble Senior."
The Beast King nodded and said in a gentle tone, "Nephew, you must be very tired after rushing to Central State City.
This old man has already prepared a place for you to stay. You should first settle down and rest. After you recover your strength, this old man will take you around the city to adapt to the environment as soon as possible." Ji Tianxing didn't immediately agree.
After thinking for a moment, he asked, "Senior, my master must have already told you that I came to Central State this time to join the Monarch Mansion."
"Senior, please tell me about the Monarch Mansion so that I can prepare." Chapter 493. The Beast King looked at Ji Tianxing and said in a serious tone, "The Monarch Mansion is the most mysterious and powerful institution in the Central State. It is also the most sacred place of martial arts in the Tianxian continent. I believe Tianxing already knows about this, right?" Ji Tianxing nodded and did not say anything. He listened quietly.
The Beast King continued, "There is no need for me to elaborate on the power and mystery of the Monarch Mansion.
I believe you already know. You only need to know that even the imperial courts of the Human Clan, Demon Clan, and Water Clan fear and respect the Monarch Mansion. You can understand how high the status of the Monarch Mansion is. As the saying goes, great hermits hide in the city.
The Monarch Mansion that is extremely mysterious in the eyes of ordinary people is actually in the Central State City. However, the Monarch Mansion is in an alternate space, just like the ancient realm of the Heavenly Stellar region. The entrance to the alternate space is near the Forest of Divine Steels in the city. Although there is no one guarding there is a mysterious barrier set up. No one can enter without permission. Only the Divine Masters and Princes of the Monarch Mansion are qualified to enter and leave the Monarch Mansion freely." Hearing this, Ji Tianxing could not help but raise his eyebrows and asked in confusion, "May I ask, Senior, what is the meaning of Divine Masters and Princes?" The Beast King explained slowly, "Although the Monarch Mansion is the #1 sacred place of martial arts in the continent, there are not many people in it. It is said that there is a Mansion Master, 10 Divine Masters, and more than 50 princes. The Mansion Master of the Monarch Mansion is recognized as the #1 elite warrior in the continent. However, that Mansion Master's whereabouts were mysterious. He was elusive, and the number of people who had seen his true appearance could be counted on one hand. He has not appeared for nearly 100 years. The things in the Monarch Mansion are all managed by the 10 Divine Masters. The 10 Divine Masters are all elite warriors of the refined soul stage. They each have their own duties and teach the cultivation of more than 50 princes. Each genius who enters the Monarch Mansion to cultivate is called princes to show their respect and dignity. When those princes surpass the Heavenly Yuan stage and reach the refined soul stage, they will receive the title of Emperor. Each princes are the top talents of their respective clans. They come from the most powerful families and forces of their respective clans. Their status is unparalleled and they can move freely in the Tianxian continent. The powerful forces of the various races would not easily offend them, and would even think of ways to rope them in. It's because if those princes do not die prematurely, they will certainly become elite warriors at the refined soul stage. They will be all-powerful and look down on the Tianxian land." After listening to the Beast King's narration, not only did Ji Tianxing yearn for it, but even Yan and Ji Ku were overwhelmed with emotions. They were rather envious and respectful. Ji Tianxing pondered for a moment before he said, "I didn't expect that the #1 martial Dao Holy Land on the continent would only accept 50 princes. From the looks of it, those 50-plus princes are the top geniuses of the entire continent." The Beast King nodded in agreement. "That's right. On the Tianxian land, there were countless geniuses from different clans. However, only the most outstanding 50 people were qualified to enter the Monarch Mansion. Nephew Tianxing, entering the Monarch Mansion is as difficult as ascending to the heavens. You must be mentally prepared." Ji Tianxing nodded to show that he understood and asked, "Senior, did you find out when the Imperial Monarch Mansion will be recruiting the Imperial Princes? If one wants to enter, what are the requirements?" The Beast King nodded slightly and said with a serious tone, The Imperial Monarch Mansion will not take the initiative to recruit the Imperial Princes, and there is no set time for the examination. As long as the geniuses from different clans meet the basic requirements of the Imperial Monarch Mansion, they can hand in their visiting cards at any time and accept the examination. Ji Tianqing revealed a trace of expectation and asked, "What are the basic requirements of the Imperial Monarch Mansion?" The Beast King extended 2 fingers and said with a sonorous tone, "There are only 3 requirements. First, you must have strength above the Yuandan stage. Second, you must have 1 or more heavenly bloodlines. Third, you must not be over 30 years old." When Ji Tianqing heard this, he instantly frowned in confusion. These 3 requirements seem very high, but they are not too rare? Yan also nodded in agreement and said with a face full of expectation, "If that's the case, I also meet the basic requirements." The Beast King stroked his beard and nodded. "That's right. In the Central State, there are at least 8,000 people with heavenly bloodlines and Yuandan stage strength under the age of 30. But among these geniuses, only 50 or so people can stand out and become the Emperor of the Imperial Monarch Mansion. Because the basic requirements of the Imperial Monarch Mansion are not too high, but the entrance examination is very harsh. If you want to become the Emperor, not only must you have a strong identity and background, you must also defeat a certain Emperor." Hearing this, Yan was immediately disappointed and muttered with a bitter face, "To have a strong identity and background, you still have to defeat an Emperor? Then I definitely have no hope." Ji Tianqing also frowned and said in a serious tone, "This examination method is indeed harsh. Every emperor is a top genius and must be very strong. If anyone can defeat an emperor, they are indeed qualified to become the new emperor. The examination method of the Imperial Monarch Mansion is harsh but also very reasonable." At this time Yan frowned and thought for a moment and asked doubtfully, "Senior Beast King, what if a certain emperor has a close relationship with the challenger and deliberately loses to the challenger?" The Beast King chuckled and shook his head. "This is absolutely impossible. When the challenger fights with the emperor, there will be a god master present to supervise the battle. If the situation you mentioned occurs, not only will the challenger be disqualified, but the emperor will also be expelled from the Imperial Monarch Mansion. Moreover, every emperor's son was a prodigy, a future overlord. They have noble identities, strong backgrounds, and powerful strength. Of course, they cherish their wings and will not destroy their own reputation." Yan nodded to show that she understood and did not interrupt. Ji Tianqing thought for a moment and asked the Beast King, "Senior, since the examination of the Imperial Monarch Mansion is so harsh, then the 50 or so disciples should all be Heaven Origin stage experts, right?" The Beast King shook his head and said in a playful tone, "This is not necessarily the case. There are very few people who, although not Heaven Origin stage experts, can become the emperor with a strong enough identity and background. For example, the descendants of the imperial court and the direct descendants of the ancient families may be accepted by the Imperial Monarch Mansion." When Ji Tianqing heard the words ancient families, he naturally thought of the Cloud Spirit Palace. He thought to himself, "I wonder if eldest senior sister will enter the Imperial Monarch Mansion?" The Beast King saw that he was silent and looked a little serious, so he smiled and comforted him. "Tianqing, there's no hurry to enter the Imperial Monarch Mansion. I suggest you rest for a few days and then slowly plan this matter in the future. Anyway, you're still young. Even if you wait for another 3 to 5 years, you won't exceed the deadline." Hee. The Beast King made a joke to comfort Ji Tianqing. However, he did not know that Ji Tianqing only wanted to enter the Imperial Monarch Mansion as soon as possible so that he could see Yun Yao as soon as possible.
"Brothers, please remember to vote for me, please." Chapter 494. Ji Tianqing, Ji Ku, and Yan settled down in the Qingfeng courtyard. Although the courtyard was very big, there were not many people living in it. Other than the Beast King, White Ape, the guards, and Ji Tianqing, there were only 20 servants and maids. As a result, the Qingfeng courtyard was very quiet and peaceful. It was very suitable for living and cultivation. The heaven and earth spirit qi in the central state was incomparably dense, and a powerful spirit gathering formation was set up in the Qingfeng courtyard. Everyone lived in the Qingfeng courtyard, and their cultivation speed was faster than in the sky-bearing sect. Unknowingly, 4 days passed in a flash. After 4 days of recuperation, Ji Tianqing and the other 2 recovered their strength and returned to their peak state. At the same time, Ji Tianxing gradually learned about the Central State City. The Central State was located in the center of the Tianxian continent. It was very vast and rich in resources.
In the vast Central State there were all kinds of races living.
There were at least tens of thousands of cities. The southern region was under the jurisdiction of the human imperial court.
In those cities and villages, the people living there were basically humans.
There were very few foreign races. The eastern region was naturally under the jurisdiction of the water race imperial court. The western region was undoubtedly the territory of the demon race imperial court. And the Central State City was located in the center of the Central State. It was also the center of the entire Tianxian continent. It was a truly peaceful and neutral land. No matter what race they were, they could live in the Central State City. As long as they did not violate the laws of the Central State City, they would not be in any danger. On the surface, the Central State City was under the jurisdiction of the city lord's mansion, but everyone in the city knew that the monarch's mansion was the master of the city. In fact, the entire Central State was under the jurisdiction of the monarch's mansion. If the monarch's mansion had any orders or announcements, the various imperial courts would not dare to neglect or violate them. In short, the Central State City was worthy of being the #1 sacred city in the Tianxian continent. Its status was extraordinary and profound. On the morning of the 5th day, the three of them left the Qingfeng courtyard and strolled around the city. The Beast King wanted to send White Ape with them as a guide to help them familiarize themselves with the situation in the city. However, Ji Tianxing had other plans, so he rejected the Beast King's good intentions. He brought Ji Ku and Yen out of Qingfeng courtyard. He asked passers-by about the location of the Forest of Divine Monuments and rushed there. This was because he was still thinking about the imperial residence and wanted to personally go to the Forest of Divine Monuments to take a look. The three of them strolled around at a leisurely pace. As they felt the great vicissitudes of Central State City's atmosphere and strange and variegated scenery, their moods also became much more relaxed. 4 hours later, Ji Tianxing and the other two arrived at the vicinity of the Divine Steel Forest. The Forest of Divine Steels was located near the plaza in the middle of the city. It was a forest of steels with a radius of several thousand meters. In the forest of steels that looked like a cemetery, there were tens of thousands of tall steels.
Most of the stone tablets had been eroded by the passage of time, and the words on them were somewhat blurred.
Every stone tablet was inscribed with the name and honorific title of a soul refinement realm expert. It also recorded the achievements and glory of that person. Ji Tianxing observed for a moment and discovered that the soul refinement realm experts recorded on the 10,000 divine steels came from various races. And these soul refinement realm experts all came from the imperial residence. He had heard from the Beast King that as long as the imperial prince of the imperial residence reached the soul refinement realm and obtained the imperial rank honorific title, he would be qualified to set up a divine steel here. The tens of thousands of divine steels in the Forest of Divine Monuments meant that the imperial residence had cultivated tens of thousands of soul refinement realm experts in the past thousands of years. Ji Ku and Yen also understood this point, so they followed Ji Tianxing's footsteps and walked into the depths of the Forest of Divine Monuments, looking at the various divine steels along the way. After an hour, Ji Tianxing and the other two passed through the Forest of Divine Monuments and walked to the end of the Black Stone Road. At the end of the road in front of the three of them, there stood a majestic door that was about 100 meters wide and 1,000 meters tall. The door was made of mysterious black stone. Even after thousands of years of wind and rain, it was still indestructible and exuded an ancient and powerful aura. There was no door at the entrance, and it was sealed by a colorful light barrier. It was obviously a super large array. Only people who knew how to break it or had the corresponding token could enter and exit the door. Above the majestic door, on the ancient and wide lintel, there were 4 large words carved in bold calligraphy. Emperor of all ages. When Ji Tianxing saw the 4 large words, he immediately understood that this simple and powerful black door was the entrance to the imperial residence. After passing through the barrier formation that sealed the door, one could enter the imperial residence. He used his spiritual sense to carefully investigate the barrier formation, and found that the grade of this formation was far beyond the heavenly origin grade. It was incomparably mysterious and complex. With his master-level array attainments, he could not see through the barrier formation at all. He could not even see the veins of the formation. The truth was just as the Beast King said. There was only one barrier formation at the entrance of the imperial residence. There was no need for guards at all. Just as Ji Tianxing looked up to size up the barrier formation, Light footsteps came from behind him, and there was a voice full of surprise. Ji Tianqing? Ji Tianqing came back to his senses and hurriedly turned his head to look behind him.
He saw a handsome young man in a golden robe with a noble temperament walking towards him. The handsome young man with a dignified appearance was none other than the Son of Heaven, Long Yunxiao, whom he had not seen for a long time.
Long Yunxiao stepped in front of Ji Tianqing and asked with a puzzled look, Ji Tianqing? You actually came to the central province? What are you doing here? Ji Tianqing looked at him indifferently and said calmly, This is the entrance to the imperial residence. What do you think I can do here? Long Yunxiao immediately raised his eyebrows and said in a playful tone, Ji Tianqing, you can't be telling me that you want to enter the imperial residence and become the emperor, right?
Why not?
Ji Tianqing looked at him expressionlessly and exuded a confident and calm aura. Long Yunxiao sized him up and couldn't help but smile. He nodded and said, I haven't seen you for 5 months, and you've actually reached the half-step heaven's origin stage. You've indeed improved very quickly. However, I have to remind you of something. In another month, I will choose a heavenly concubine in the Apocalypse Tower and announce it to the world. Ji Tianqing said indifferently, Of course, I won't forget such an important matter. Long Yunxiao, I will definitely climb up the Apocalypse Tower and have a fair battle with you. I will defeat you in front of all the powerful cultivators in the world. I hope you still remember what you said before. After I defeat you, I won't force Yunyao to become a heavenly concubine. Long Yunxiao's eyes became even more playful. He nodded and said, I'm a man of my words. I won't go back on my words. If you can really defeat me, I will voluntarily withdraw and not pester Yunyao anymore. Moreover, don't you want to enter the imperial residence? Coincidentally, I have already entered the imperial residence 2 years ago and became the 53rd emperor. If you can defeat me, you can pass the test of the imperial residence and become the new emperor. There will be one more later. Brothers, sorry to keep you waiting. Chapter 495. Upon hearing Long Yunxiao's words, Ji Tianqing realized that he had become a Thearka's son. His eyes lit up as he smiled playfully. He said to Long Yunxiao, Hee, if that's the case, I have to thank you. Since we are going to have a duel at the Apocalypse Tower in a month's time, I will send a letter to the Imperial Palace and challenge you. This is the best of both worlds, which is exactly what I want. Long Yunxiao frowned and said proudly, Ji Tianqing, you are very confident, but you are overconfident. Although you have improved a lot in the past 5 months, you are still just a half-step to ethereal stage cultivator. I would like to see if you can break through the shackles of ethereal stage in a month's time. Not long ago, I had reached the 2nd level of the sky origin stage. When we duel at the Apocalypse Tower in a month's time, I will not show you any mercy. You don't even have the slightest hope of winning. Long Yunxiao's expression and tone were even more confident than Ji Tianqing's, as if he was determined to win. Ji Tianqing glanced at him and said coldly, It is too early for you to say that. Let's duel in a month's time. All right, it's a deal. Long Yunxiao nodded and walked past him to the entrance of the Imperial Palace. However, when he reached the entrance, he stopped in his tracks. He turned around and looked at Ji Tianqing. He smiled and said playfully, By the way, I have something to tell you. A month ago, Yunyao entered the Imperial Palace and became the 55th Thearka's son. She is now cultivating in the Imperial Palace. I will take good care of her. Don't worry, hee. After that, Long Yunxiao took out the Thearka's token from his infinite space ring and walked through the door. He disappeared after passing through the colorful barrier. Ji Tianqing furrowed his brows and a cold light flashed in his eyes. He clenched his fists tightly in his sleeves. Although he clearly knew that Long Yunxiao was definitely deliberately provoking him and infuriating him. However, he hadn't seen Yunyao for a few months and didn't know how Yunyao was doing recently. He was too worried and concerned about Yunyao, so it was impossible for him to remain indifferent. Of course he was furious. Ji Ku and Yan were also angered by Ji Tianqing's words and attitude. They hurriedly opened their mouths to comfort Ji Tianqing. Yan said angrily, Senior brother Tianqing, don't listen to Long Yunxiao's nonsense. He's just trying to provoke you. He's too bad. Ji Ku also comforted him, Brother Tianqing, you know eldest senior sister's nature better than we do. You should believe that eldest senior sister will definitely not have a good impression of Long Yunxiao.
Yan hurriedly nodded in agreement.
Yes, we have to believe in eldest senior sister. She definitely won't be nice to Long Yunxiao. In a moment, Ji Tianqing suppressed the anger in his heart and calmed down. He looked at Ji Ku and Yan Seeing their concerned expressions, he smiled and said, "It's okay. You don't have to persuade me. I know what I'm doing." If eldest senior sister could accept Long Yunxiao, she would have accepted him a few years ago. Why would she leave Zhongzhou and go to the Sky Pillar sect? Long Yunxiao's provocation means that he can't get close to eldest senior sister for the time being. Since eldest senior sister has already entered the Monarch Mansion, I have to enter the Monarch Mansion as soon as possible to see her again. Speaking of this, he looked at the entrance of the Monarch Mansion with burning eyes and said in a sonorous tone, "1 month later, I will defeat Long Yunxiao at the Apocalypse Pagoda no matter what." Seeing that he wasn't angered and was even more determined, Ji Ku and Yan both smiled. Yan clenched her fists and said with determination, "Senior brother Tianqing, I believe that you can defeat that despicable Long Yunxiao." Ji Ku also said with anticipation, "Brother Tianqing, you can only win the battle at the Apocalypse Pagoda. After you defeat Long Yunxiao, not only will you make him withdraw, but you will also become famous and enter the Monarch Mansion. You will become a noble emperor. This is killing 3 birds with 1 stone." "Yes, of course." Ji Tianqing smiled and nodded. Then, he turned around and left with Ji Ku and Yan After the 3 of them left the Forest of Divine Monuments, they returned to the Qing Feng courtyard. Ji Tianqing had made up his mind. In the next month, he would cultivate in seclusion and do everything he could to break through to the ethereal realm. The battle at the Apocalypse Pagoda was very important. He would not lose, and he couldn't lose. An hour later, the 3 of them were walking on a bustling street in the city. Suddenly, they heard a commotion in front of them. The bustling crowd on the street immediately parted to both sides and moved to the side of the road. Ji Tianqing, Ji Ku, and Yan were walking in the middle of the street when they saw the crowd parting. The 3 of them were confused as they looked at the empty street in front of them. At the end of the street, there was a large group of people walking toward them with a majestic aura. It was a group of about 200 guards of honor. They looked majestic and luxurious. They looked even more majestic than the emperor when he went on an inspection tour. There were 16 primal core realm elites in black armor. They were so tall that they didn't look like humans. They were riding on huge white dragon colts and were leading the way for the group. Behind the 16 white dragon steeds, there were more than 100 demon clan guards who were as tall and sturdy as iron towers. Although they were more than 1,000 steps away, Ji Tianqing could feel the ferocious and murderous aura that the demon guards were emitting. In the middle of the group of demon guards was an extremely luxurious emperor's chariot. It was dazzling with golden light. The emperor's chariot was like a small moving palace. It had a radius of 10 meters. It was made of heavenly fire true gold and was inlaid with a dazzling array of precious gems and spiritual jades. On the round canopy of the emperor's chariot, there were countless chains of pearls and gems hanging down. They covered the inside of the emperor's chariot like a curtain, making it hazy and unreal. Around the emperor's chariot, there were more than 60 beautiful foreign race women. Some were holding jade rui, some were carrying flower baskets, and some were carrying pipa and musical instruments. All in all, this luxurious and magnificent non-humankind troupe almost filled up the entire street. The people on the street all stood on the side of the street and looked up at the guards of honor. Their faces were full of awe and excitement. Ji Tianqing and the other 2 came back to their senses. They also walked to the side of the street and stood still, silently watching the guards of honor as they walked over. At this time, many warriors and commoners around the 3 of them were also discussing in low voices. That seems to be the demon race's Kunwu Prince. What a grand display! Don't you know? Kunwu Prince entered the emperor's mansion 2 years ago and became the noble emperor's son. It's actually the emperor's son? Oh my god! This is the first time I've seen the legendary emperor's son. He's really noble and sacred. The 6th chapter has arrived. Sorry for the long wait. These few days, Little he will try to adjust the chapters as much as possible and try to update all the chapters at once at 10 a.m. every day. Thank you for your support and understanding. Chapter 496. Ji Ku and Yan could understand Ji Tianqing's mood. However, Ji Ku said with a worried face, "Brother Tianqing, There are too many people here. I'm afraid it will be difficult for you to sneak into the honor guard. Ji Tianqing shook his head and explained to her, Cuckoo, don't worry. I won't follow Kunwa's honor guard here. I'll go to the Forest of Divine Monuments first. When the entrance of the Monarch Mansion opens, I'll take the opportunity to sneak into the honor guard. No one is near the Forest of Divine Monuments.
As long as I'm careful, I won't be discovered.
Yan said with a worried face, Senior Brother Tianqing, even if you can sneak into the Monarch Mansion, it's a mysterious and powerful holy land. I'm afraid your whereabouts will be exposed soon. Ji Tianqing frowned and said in a deep voice, Now is a great opportunity. If I miss this opportunity, I don't know how many days I'll have to wait. After I sneak into the Monarch Mansion, I'll act according to the circumstances. Don't worry. Ji Ku was still a little worried and asked, Brother Tianqing, even if you can sneak into the Monarch Mansion, how are you going to get out? Ji Tianqing already had a plan and explained, I'll find Senior Sister. She will definitely have a way to send me out of the Monarch Mansion. At this time Yan suddenly thought of something and quickly took out a dark golden talisman from her space ring and handed it to him. Senior Brother Tianqing, I have a way. This is an invisibility talisman specially made by our fire tribe. It's a heavenly origin talisman. Maybe it can help you achieve your wish. The fire tribe was born with the ability to control fire. They were good at drawing talismans and making talismans. They could make all kinds of magical talismans. Before Yan left the fire tribe, the Fire Emperor and Fire Empress prepared many powerful talismans for him in case of emergencies. Ji Tianqing saw the talisman in Yan's hand and suddenly showed a look of surprise. Invisibility talisman? Yan you actually have such a magical talisman? Yan nodded and said with a smile, This invisibility talisman was personally made by my father using the top talisman Dao's secret method. I never had the chance to use it before, but now I can finally put it to good use. Well, that's much easier. Ji Tianqing's expression eased a lot. He nodded and thanked Yan thank you. While casting a spell to activate the power in the talisman, Yan explained to him, Senior Brother Tianqing, this is a special talisman of our fire tribe. Only the power of our fire tribe can use it. After I use this talisman to make you invisible, it can only last for 4 hours at most. You must make good use of the time. As his voice fell, the dark golden talisman turned into a wisp of golden flame, enveloping Ji Tianqing's body. A miraculous scene appeared. Ji Tianqing's body became thin and transparent. In the blink of an eye, he disappeared into thin air. Jika's eyes suddenly widened, and her pretty face revealed a look of deep surprise. Ji Tianqing lowered his head and looked at his transparent body. He couldn't help but praise. This invisibility talisman is indeed mysterious. It actually has such a miraculous effect. Not only can't the naked eye see me, but even if a master uses his soul sense, he won't be able to find me. Yan smiled and nodded. Senior Brother Tianqing, you can go now without worry. Remember, the invisibility talisman only lasts for 4 hours. You must leave as soon as possible. Ji Ku also exhorted with concern. Brother Tianqing, you must be careful. Ji Tianqing said with his soul sense. You go back to Qingfeng Courtyard first and wait for me to come back. After saying that, he quickly crossed the street and followed the honor guard to the Forest of Divine Monuments. Ji Ku and Yan couldn't see Ji Tianqing's figure. But both of them knew that Ji Tianqing must have blended in with the honor guard. They prayed silently in their hearts, then left the street and rushed back to Qingfeng Courtyard. About a quarter of an hour later, Prince Kunwa's honor guard majestically entered the Forest of Divine Monuments and arrived at the entrance of the Monarch Mansion. Ji Tianqing had been invisible the whole time. He had been blended in with the honor guard and was not discovered by anyone. At this time, Kunwa took out the prince's token and activated the Monarch Mansion's enchantment array. The honor guard entered the gate in an endless stream, passed through the colorful barrier, and entered the Monarch Mansion. Ji Tianqing followed at the back of the honor guard and soon entered an alternate space. He saw a vast grassland under his feet, and in front of him were towering and majestic mountain ranges. Every dark green mountain range was like a huge divine dragon lying between heaven and earth, exuding a powerful and majestic aura. At the end of the vast grassland, close to a towering mountain range, there was a huge lake as calm as a mirror. The land was vast, the mountains were beautiful, and the sky was blue. Occasionally, A few white clouds could be seen. There were also a few gigantic flying spirit beasts that were soaring in the sky. This was the mysterious sacred monarch mansion. Before entering the monarch mansion, Ji Tianqing had fantasized many times about what the mysterious and powerful monarch mansion was like. Now, he finally saw that the monarch mansion was not only a mystic realm, but also a vast small world. Kunwa's honor guard stepped on the green and soft grassland and rushed toward the mountain range in front.
Although the guards carrying the monarch's chariot were running on the grassland as fast as the wind,
their speed was too slow for Ji Tianqing. The effect of the invisibility talisman only lasted for 4 hours. Ji Tianqing did not want to waste time and followed the honor guard into the mountain range. He quickly condensed a pair of wings with his Kenshin battle robe and quietly flew into the sky, rushing into the depths of the mountain range as fast as lightning. After 15 minutes, he entered the undulating mountain range and flew thousands of feet high in the sky. Looking down from the sky, he could see the situation of the mountain range below clearly. He saw that there were dozens of huge mountain ranges in the area with a radius of thousands of miles. The many mountain ranges were connected head to tail. Clearly, they were arranged in a special pattern, containing the mysteries of an incomparably mysterious array formation. With Ji Tianqing's array formation skills, he could not see what kind of array the dozens of huge mountain ranges were arranged in. But he could be sure that this array formed by dozens of mountain ranges in a radius of thousands of miles was definitely an array formation that surpassed the divine origin level. Moreover, the person who could use dozens of mountain ranges to set up an array formation must be a powerhouse above the soul refinement realm. Ji Tianqing observed for a moment and found that each mountain range was a spirit vein that gathered endless heaven and earth spirit qi. Dozens of spirit veins gathered together, causing the heaven and earth spirit qi in a radius of thousands of miles to be so dense that it made one's hair stand on end. The vast and boundless heaven and earth spirit qi condensed into colorful auspicious clouds in the sky, sprinkling colorful water droplets continuously. Seeing this scene, Ji Tianqing was instantly filled with shock and surprise. The heaven and earth spirit qi condensed into clouds, reaching the level of spirit qi liquid. Those colorful raindrops are the legendary spiritual liquid. Chapter 497. Ji Tianqing had read a brief history of martial arts in the Tianxian continent and understood many martial arts legends. He knew that spiritual stones and spiritual liquid were rare resources that martial artists needed to cultivate. Spiritual stones were only produced in mines and were extremely rare. Moreover, martial artists needed to meditate and cultivate to absorb the spiritual qi contained in spiritual stones. However, spiritual liquid was different. It was a treasure that was even rarer than spiritual stones. Spiritual liquid was formed by pure spiritual qi and could be consumed directly. If martial artists used spirit liquid to cultivate, not only could they save time in meditation, the effects were even better than spirit stones. However, while spiritual stones and mines were common, spiritual liquid only existed in legends. Ji Tianqing never expected that he would see spiritual qi turn into clouds and liquid in the monarch mansion with his own eyes. This made him exclaim in shock, "The monarch mansion is indeed the #1 martial arts sanctuary on the continent. The spiritual qi here is so dense that it can turn into spiritual liquid. Ordinary flowers and trees would become spiritual herbs and spiritual trees after being nourished by the spiritual liquid. If martial artists were to cultivate here, their strength would increase 10 times faster than the outside world. No wonder everyone believes that only by entering the monarch mansion can one surpass the Sky Yuan stage and reach the legendary refined soul stage." When he thought of this, Ji Tianqing's desire to enter the monarch mansion became even more urgent. He continued to fly above the mountain range and observed from above. After a while, he saw another clue.
Every mountain range was a spiritual vein, and the tallest mountain in the mountain range was the spring of the spiritual vein.
The spiritual qi contained in the entire spiritual vein would constantly surge out from the spring. Therefore, at the spring of every mountain range, on the peak of the majestic mountain range, there was a huge and magnificent palace. Those magnificent and majestic palaces were all located on the peaks of the mountains that were tens of thousands of meters high. The palaces were shrouded in a hazy 5-colored spiritual qi, and below them was a white sea of clouds. This made each palace seem to be standing in the sea of clouds, emitting a hazy 5-colored spiritual light, as if it was the palace of the gods in the 9 heavens. Ji Tianqing observed for a while and suddenly guessed something. "I understand now. The palaces above the spirit vein spring must be the residences of the princes. Within 1,000 miles, there were more than 50 mountain ranges, which corresponded to more than 50 princes. Every Thearka's son occupies a mountain range, a spirit vein, and a cave abode, which means that they have an extremely abundant amount of cultivation resources. He was extremely envious of those imperial princes. With such abundant and luxurious resources, it would be difficult for them not to become geniuses. However, he believed that it wouldn't be long before he could enter the imperial palace and become a noble imperial prince. He would have his own spiritual vein and cave abode. Very quickly, an hour had passed. Ji Tianqing crossed a dozen towering mountain ranges and flew to the center of the heaven and earth formation. While he was still far away, he saw a towering mountain in front of him that towered into the sky. The towering mountain that was more than 10,000 meters tall was clearly the center of the area within 1,000 miles. It was also the core of the heaven and earth great formation. Everything above the mountainside was enshrouded in thick white clouds and 5-colored spiritual light. At the peak of the mountain, there was actually a 5-colored spiritual lake with a radius of 5 kilometers. That spiritual lake was the spring of the great formation. The heaven and earth spirit chi within 1,000 miles would constantly emerge from the spring. The extremely dense heaven and earth spirit chi would condense into spiritual liquid. And the endless spiritual liquid would eventually converge into a spiritual lake. After understanding this, Ji Tianqing's heart raced again. Oh my God! A drop of spiritual liquid is already very precious. Its value is comparable to a spirit stone. But the spiritual liquid here can converge into a spiritual lake? How many drops of spiritual liquid would there be? Not to mention using the spiritual liquid to cultivate. Even if I bathed in it every day, I wouldn't be able to finish it in my lifetime, right? At that moment, Ji Tianqing's heart was filled with a strong desire and impulse. He really wanted to jump into the spirit lake and drink until he was full of spirit liquid. However, he immediately suppressed this thought. Because he saw that in the sky above the spiritual lake, there were dozens of colorful spiritual jade thrones floating. There was a young expert sitting on each of the spiritual jade thrones. Those young powerhouses were male and female. Their appearances and clans were all different. There were humans, demons, and water clans. Moreover, every one of them was dressed luxuriously. Their auras were noble and graceful. Their entire bodies emitted a strong aura of confidence and pride. Ji Tianqing glanced over and saw almost 50 young powerhouses. Almost all of their strengths had reached the sky origin stage. Even if there were 2 or 3 people who only had the strength of the origin core stage, they had all reached the 7th level of the origin core stage. Moreover, their auras were not inferior to others. He immediately understood the identity of those young powerhouses. They were the princes of the monarch's estate. Almost 50 princes sat on the spiritual jade thrones. They formed a circle around a lotus throne that was dazzling with golden light. On the lotus throne that was surrounded by the princes like stars surrounding the moon, a black-robed man sat cross-legged. The black-robed man was a human powerhouse. His figure was thin and tall, and his face was resolute and dignified. He only wore a black robe. His long hair was draped behind his head. He did not tie his hair into a bun or wear a jade crown. There was not a single ornament on his body. However, even though his attire was simple and unadorned, his entire body emitted a transcendent aura as though he was looking down on heaven and earth. The feeling came from the depths of his soul. Ji Tianqing felt it very strongly and deeply. He could even feel that the black-robed man had surpassed the category of mortals. His life had reached a whole new level. As he thought of this, a thought subconsciously appeared in his mind. Soul Refinement Stage Powerhouse. God-tier Master. That black-robed man must be the legendary God-tier Master of the monarch's estate. A few months ago, Ji Tianqing heard that there was an extraordinary Soul Refinement Stage powerhouse above the Sky Origin Stage. Before today, he still thought that Soul Refinement Stage powerhouses were high and mighty. It was almost impossible to see them. However, he did not expect to see a Soul Refinement Stage powerhouse with his own eyes at such a close distance. He quickly stopped 1,000 meters away from the princes and did not dare to get any closer. He was not afraid of being discovered by the Sky Origin princes, but he had to be wary of the Soul Refinement Stage God-tier Master. After all, he was not sure how far the God-tier Master's spiritual consciousness could reach. Moreover, he didn't know how powerful that God-tier Master was. The only thing he could do was to hold his breath and calm his mind. He tried his best to conceal his aura so that the God-tier master would not notice him. The sky was quiet. The black-robed God-tier master sat on the golden lotus throne with his eyes closed. The martial monarch's sons in the surroundings sat quietly without saying a word. Even if they did talk, they would secretly use their spiritual consciousness to communicate. Chapter 498. The black-robed divine master closed his eyes and rested. Many of the thearchs were also silent. Ji Tianqing hid in the sky not far away. His sharp eyes scanned the thearchs and searched for Yun Yao's figure. 1, 2, 3, 4. He saw one majestic and peerless thearchs after another. He also saw the top prodigies of the various races. They were all so elegant. After a while, when he saw a young human in a golden robe, his eyes paused. He was very familiar with the young man in the golden robe. He had seen him at the entrance of the emperor's residence today. That was the emperor, Long Yunshao. Long Yunshao sat on the spiritual jade throne with a calm expression. He was silent and dignified. However, every once in a while, he would look at the beautiful figure on the left with a gentle look in his eyes. Ji Tianqing followed his gaze and saw a cold and proud figure in a moon-white dress. She was an extremely beautiful woman with an otherworldly temperament that could topple cities. She sat quietly on the spiritual jade throne with her eyes closed. Her expression was cold and indifferent, as if she did not care about everything around her. Ji Tianqing's eyes froze as he stared at her. He muttered in his heart, "Eldest senior sister. I've finally seen you." Without a doubt, that was Yun Yao, whom he had been worried about and swore to protect for the rest of his life. The moment he saw Yun Yao, his eyes became gentle, and a smile appeared at the corner of his mouth. Ever since he had recovered from his injuries and left the Cloud Spirit Palace, he had been worried about Yun Yao for the past few months. It was as if a heavy stone was pressing down on his heart. Until now, when he saw that Yun Yao was safe and sound and that her injuries and complexion had recovered to normal, he finally felt relieved. Only then did he finally let go of the huge rock in his heart and secretly let out a sigh of relief. Time passed quietly. Ji Tianqing had been silently staring at Yun Yao. He could not get enough of her. Yun Yao closed her eyes and rested for a long time. However, she suddenly frowned as if she had sensed something. She slowly opened her eyes and quietly turned her head to look in the direction of Ji Tianqing. She and Ji Tianqing were connected by blood, and their minds were interlinked. There was a miraculous telepathy between them. Just now, she vaguely sensed Ji Tianqing's aura, which seemed to be nearby. However, she didn't dare to believe that this was true. She even thought that she was hallucinating. Therefore, there was a hint of doubt and expectation in her eyes. However, when she turned her head to take a look, she saw that the sky was empty. Other than the many princes in the surroundings, there was no one else. The anticipation in Yun Yao's eyes dimmed and was replaced by disappointment. She turned her head back and continued to close her eyes to rest. Ji Tianqing saw everything clearly. He was secretly anxious, but there was nothing he could do. If the black-robed god master was not present, he really wanted to fly to Yun Yao's side and use his spiritual sense to communicate with her and greet her. Unfortunately, the black-robed god master was present, so he had no choice but to suppress this thought. At this moment, a handsome young man with silver hair and wearing a white fox fur coat flew over from the sky. He was Prince Kuan Wu, the one who helped Ji Tianqing sneak into the monarch mansion. Kuan Wu flapped his silver wings and streaked across the sky like a shooting star. He arrived at the scene in a few breaths' time. Prince Kuan Wu greets God Master Black Feather. Kuan Wu stood in the sky and bowed respectfully to the black-robed God Master on the golden lotus seat. God Master Black Feather opened his eyes. There was a faint flash of lightning in his eyes, which tore the sky in front of him until it was slightly distorted. Kuan Wu, have a seat, God Master Black Feather said indifferently. Kuan Wu cupped his hands and bowed again. Then, he found a spiritual jade seat and quickly sat down. God Master Black Feather scanned the scene indifferently. When he saw that there were still 5 empty spiritual jade seats, he said calmly, "Basically, everyone is here. Those who are not here need not wait anymore. The Monarch Mansion has summoned all of you back to discuss an important matter." A few months ago, the ancient demon emperor, who had been suppressed for thousands of years, broke the seal and reappeared in the world. Princes, please speak freely and discuss how to deal with this matter. God Master Blackfeather's expression and tone were cold and indifferent. His words were also very concise. He simply explained what he wanted to discuss. Then, he looked at the crowd in silence and waited for the princes to express their opinions. Ji Tianxing, who was hiding not far away, raised his eyebrows and looked expectant.
As I expected, the monarch mansion has summoned all the princes back to Middle State City because of the reappearance of the demon emperor.
He stared at the princes in the field, holding his breath as he listened attentively. However, the 50 princes were all silent. They looked indifferent and their eyes were calm. No one spoke first.
God Master Blackfeather was not in a hurry and did not urge the princes to speak. After 100 breaths, a demon race princess with a slender figure and a foxy temperament spoke in a clear and pleasant voice. Since none of you are willing to speak first, I, Fox Princess, will throw a brick to attract Jade and give you a start.
Hearing this, Crown Prince Kunwu quickly chimed in. As the third princess, Fox Princess does have the right to speak first. Kunwu is all ears. A few other demon race princes also nodded to express their support. The few princes who spoke in agreement were all from the demon race like Fox Princess. Of course, they were on the same side and were very close to each other. Moreover, Fox Princess was the third princess in the monarch mansion. In terms of strength and status, she was outstanding. Among the demon race princes and princesses, she was the most powerful and the most senior. More than a dozen demon race princes followed her lead. Since Fox Princess had spoken, the demon race princes naturally had to agree and support her. Fox Princess did not continue with the pleasantries. With a serious expression, she said in a low and resolute voice, "The demon race is cruel and bloodthirsty. If there is a chance to exterminate the demon race, we must not miss it. In the ancient era, the demon race once massacred all the races in the world. They caused the sky to fall and the earth to rend, causing many races to perish. A race as cruel and inhumane as the demon race should not exist in this world. For nearly 1,000 years, the demon race was without a leader and the Tian Shen land was able to maintain peace. Now that the demon emperor has reappeared in the world, if he were to lead the demon race, he would certainly set off a new round of bloody storms.
Therefore, Fox Princess thinks that the monarch mansion should do everything in their power to kill the demon emperor as soon as possible to prevent him from bringing disaster to the world." After she finished speaking, Fox Princess extended her slender hand and sprinkled the 5-colored vital essence into the spiritual lake on the mountain peak below. Instantly, the 5-colored spiritual lake with a radius of 10 miles turned into a miraculous mirror and displayed a clear picture. It was the picture of a tragic battlefield. Tens of thousands of demon race armies were madly attacking an ancient and majestic city. The city with a radius of a few hundred miles was shrouded by the demon cloud that covered the sky and the sun. It was gloomy and cold. The flames of war were ignited everywhere in the city. Ruins, blood, and corpses were everywhere. The ferocious and bloodthirsty demon race army charged into the city and brutally slaughtered the demon race civilians. After a moment, the ancient city in the picture collapsed and turned into a giant pile of ruins. Chapter 499. After the images in the spiritual lake ended, Fox Concubine waved her hand again and shot out beams of 5-colored light. Then, images appeared in the spiritual lake's mirror one after another. Every image was similar. They were all scenes of the demon race's villages, tribes, and cities being attacked and massacred by the demon race. The scenes in the images were extremely tragic and bloody. It made people feel depressed and angry, and they hated the demon race's cruelty and violence. Fox Concubine showed more than a dozen images before saying solemnly, "The image just now was the scene of the demon race's army massacring the demon race's people 1,000 years ago. Now that the demon race has enjoyed 1,000 years of peace, we can finally recuperate. I, Fox Concubine, will never allow the demon king to return to the northern desert and lead the demon race's army to massacre the demon race's people again."
Speaking of this, Fox Concubine looked at God Teacher Blackfeather solemnly and said, "God Teacher Blackfeather, Fox Concubine pleads for the imperial residents to find the ancient demon king's tracks as soon as possible. Please kill it before it escapes back to the northern desert to prevent future troubles." God Teacher Blackfeather said indifferently, "The imperial residence is in Zhongzhou City and controls the land of Zhongzhou. They are only responsible for protecting the land of Zhongzhou. If the ancient demon king escapes to Zhongzhou and wreaks havoc, the imperial residents will naturally send experts to kill it. As for the eastern wilderness, western wilderness, northern desert, and the 9 regions in the south, they are ruled by the various imperial courts. The imperial residents will not interfere. God Teacher Blackfeather's attitude was very clear. The imperial residents ruled the land of Zhongzhou and would only protect it. They would not care about the lives of the various races. After all, that was the imperial court's business. Fox Concubine frowned and asked again, God Teacher Blackfeather, if the imperial residence is neutral and will not interfere, why did you gather all the princes to discuss this matter? God Teacher Blackfeather looked at her indifferently and explained, what I said just now is the imperial residence's position. The reason why I gathered all of you for a discussion is to hear your opinions. The imperial residence will make a decision based on everyone's opinions. Thank you for clearing my doubts. Fox Concubine bowed and did not say anything else. At this moment, Long Yunxiao spoke in a calm tone. 1,000 years ago, the Devil Emperor unleashed a massacre in our territory, causing rivers of blood to flow in several regions and plunging the people into misery and suffering. Now that the Fiend Emperor has broken the seal, he will definitely wreak havoc in our territory. I suggest that the Imperial Monarch residents send experts to kill the Devil King as soon as possible. Furthermore, our Imperial Court will also assist the Monarch Manor with all our might. We vow to fight the demon race to the end. As the Emperor of the Imperial Court, Long Yunxiao's words represented the attitude of the Imperial Court. The princes and princesses of the human race nodded slightly in agreement. Seeing this, Fox Princess glanced at Long Yunxiao, and a playful smile appeared on her lips. Son of Heaven is wise indeed. Our race is the same as the human race. We have an irreconcilable blood feud with the demon race. If we allow the Devil Emperor to recover, he will definitely lead the Devil Army to attack our West Baron monster race. Although you humans are located in the southern continent and are separated from the northern desert by the central continent, you seem to be the furthest away from the demon race. However, once the demons of the western wilderness are defeated, the demon emperor's next target will be the humans of the southern land. The relationship between our 2 races is as close as the lips and teeth. Without the lips, the teeth will feel cold. Long Yunxiao looked at Fox Princess, but he didn't say anything. He just nodded. He entered the imperial residence late and was only ranked 53rd. However, Fox Princess had been in the imperial residence for many years and was ranked 3rd. Her strength was several levels higher than his. Before today, Fox Princess had never spoken a word to him, nor did she take him seriously. Of course, he knew that Fox Princess was talking to him in public just to pull him to the same side. At the same time, a princess of the water race sitting opposite Fox Princess spoke indifferently. The territory of the demon race is close to the demon race of the northern desert. Since ancient times, the demon race has harmed us. 1,000 years ago, the Silver Moon Fox race was at its peak, but the demon army slaughtered 60 to 70% of its people. Fox Princess's indignation was understandable. However, the water race of the eastern wilderness doesn't have much of a grudge against the demon race. If you attack the Devil Emperor, I will give you my blessings. I hope you will win, haha. This prince was as strong as an iron tower. He wore a loose purple robe and exuded a domineering aura. His face was resolute and fierce, and his temperament was valiant. A golden dragon horn protruded from his forehead, and his exposed skin was covered in fine dragon scales. This was the most respected prince of the golden dragon race in the eastern wilderness. He was also the prince of the demon imperial court, Tai. More importantly, he was ranked first among the more than 50 princes of the imperial residence. He had already reached the half-step spirit refining realm and was recognized as the strongest among the princes. He was also the leader of the princes of the water race. When Tai finished speaking, several other princes of the water race chimed in. The imperial residence is the ruler of the middle ground. They have a high status. Why would they interfere with the grudge between the humans, demons, and demons? We haven't even found the Devil Emperor, and the humans and demons are already fighting. That's too reckless. It's just the demons. What's there to fear? The water race of the eastern wilderness isn't afraid of the demons. Fox Princess frowned at the words of the princes of the water race. She looked at Tai coldly and said in a low voice, Tai, the eastern wilderness is the same as the western wilderness. They're both close to the northern desert. Why are you gloating like this? Aren't you afraid that the Devil Emperor will lead his army to invade the East Wasteland and slaughter your water-kind people? Let's see how you're going to defend yourself by then. How are you going to explain it to your people? Tai was still calm. He dusted his wide sleeves and said slowly, for thousands of years, the water race of the Eastern Wilderness has developed under the rule of the Golden Dragon race. They're powerful and prosperous. If the ancient demon emperor dares to lead his army to invade, I'll make sure he doesn't return. Moreover, the demon army isn't good at swimming. Even if they enter the Eastern Wilderness, they won't be able to move. What do I have to fear? Tai then glanced at Fox Princess with a mocking smile. Fox Princess's beautiful face became colder and colder. After a cold snort, she ignored him. Following it, the martial monarchs of the human tribe and the beast tribe spoke too. Everyone supported the imperial residents to kill the Devil Emperor. Yun Yao listened in silence. She looked indifferent and didn't say anything. Ji Tianqing hid in the dark and observed for a long time. He understood the attitudes of the various races and saw the differences between the princes of the three races. The princes of the Eastern Wilderness water race obviously followed Tai's lead. After all, he was the most powerful and the oldest among the 50 princes. He was also the heir of the water race imperial court. The princes of the Western Wilderness demon race followed Fox Princess. The human princes and princesses all followed Long Yunxiao's opinion on the matter of dealing with the Devil Emperor. Although Long Yunxiao was weaker, he was the emperor of the human race and represented the human imperial court. An hour later, the disciples finished their discussion and looked at Divine Master He Yu, waiting for him to make a decision. Chapter 500. Ji Tianqing calculated the time. He had at most 15 minutes before the invisibility talisman's effect wore off. Within this 15 minutes, he had to leave the princes and Divine Master He Yu as soon as possible to avoid exposing himself. However, since he wanted to know the imperial residence's stance and also wanted to talk to Yun Yao, he was unwilling to leave just like that. He stared at Divine Master He Yu on the golden lotus seat and suppressed his anxiety as he waited silently. However, Divine Master He Yu did not immediately express his stance. He spoke a few more sentences, indicating that the imperial residents had not started investigating the demonic emperor's whereabouts. If the imperial residents wanted to deal with the demonic emperor, they would have to give out missions and delay the prince's cultivation. There would also be many unexpected dangers. It was even possible that some princes would be sacrificed because of this. Divine Master He Yu stated the stakes and asked the princes to consider carefully before making the final decision. The princes fell into silence again, and they were carefully weighing the pros and cons. In the blink of an eye, a quarter of an hour had passed. Ji Tianqing knew that the imperial residence was a martial arts holy land and would be very careful when making an important decision. It was normal for Divine Master He Yu and the princes to discuss for an entire day, let alone 2 hours. However, Ji Tianqing did not have enough time. Divine Master He Yu still had not expressed the imperial residence's final decision, but he could not wait any longer. Damn it! If I had another hour, I would have known the imperial residence's decision and strategy. No, I can't wait any longer. I have to leave this place in the last 15 minutes and find a safe place to hide. Then, I will think of a way to contact Senior Sister. Ji Tianqing made up his mind and prepared to turn around and leave. He was wary of Divine Master He Yu and did not dare to use too much true core power. He gently flapped his golden wings and flew into the distance. However, the flapping of his golden wings still accelerated the flow of the air, creating invisible air currents and cyclones. No matter how careful he was, this was unavoidable. Divine Master He Yu, who was sitting on the lotus seat, was pondering expressionlessly. His invisible spiritual sense covered a radius of 5 kilometers. He immediately sensed that in the sky 1,000 meters away, there was an abnormal fluctuation in the air, and a trace of true yuan leaked out. At that moment, Divine Sage He Yu suddenly raised his eyelids and looked at Ji Tianqing with eyes as sharp as swords. Ji Tianqing felt as if there was a thorn in his back when he was being stared at by his sharp eyes. His body suddenly stiffened, and he stopped, not daring to move. It's over. Have we been discovered by Divine Sovereign Black Feather? However, even though he was invisible, he could not escape from Divine Master Black Feather's senses and was discovered. Who dares to trespass into the imperial residence? God Mentor He Yu roared angrily.
He suddenly raised his right hand and waved his palm to unleash a huge 5-colored palm shadow. Shwa! That huge, dazzling palm shadow contained the power to destroy the heavens and earth. It streaked across the sky at the speed of light and instantly arrived in front of Ji Tianqing. The 5-colored palm was too fast. It was so fast that it exceeded Ji Tianqing's imagination. He had no chance to dodge it. At this critical moment, he did not have time to think. He instinctively opened his wide golden wings and blocked in front of him to protect his body. At the same time, the 5-colored giant palm with terrifying power slammed into Ji Tianqing, drowning his body. Bang! A loud, dull sound exploded and echoed in the sky. The violent and devastating force exploded, shattering the sky within 1,000 meters, revealing black cracks. A palm strike from a soul-refining realm expert was so powerful that it could tear the sky apart. Divine Master He Yu's strength was so terrifying. Ji Tianqing was sent flying by the 5-colored palm. He only stopped after he was sent flying 1,000 meters away. Fortunately, he used his golden wings to protect himself and blocked the destructive palm strike. He was not killed on the spot. Unfortunately, he suffered severe internal injuries. His internal organs were all twisted and ruptured. He opened his mouth and spat out a mouthful of blood. Moreover, the effect of the invisibility talisman was broken by Divine Master He Yu's palm strike. Ji Tianqing's figure was revealed. His face was pale and there was blood at the corner of his mouth. He looked quite miserable as he stood in the sky. Since his whereabouts had been exposed, he decided not to hide anymore. He stood in the sky openly and looked directly at Divine Master He Yu. Divine Master He Yu sized him up and raised his thick, black brows. A look of surprise flashed across his cold and indifferent eyes. A human kid at the Origin Core realm was actually able to withstand a palm strike from this lord and not die? This child is a promising talent. At the same time, the 50 martial emperor's princes turned their heads and looked at Ji Tianqing. Many of the princes looked surprised as they sized him up with complicated expressions. A few of the princes even started to discuss among themselves. Haha, it's a human kid. His face is quite unfamiliar. He doesn't know what's good for him. How dare he sneak into the monarch mansion? Even God can't save him. The sacred dignity of the monarch mansion is not to be blasphemed. This kid deserves to die for sneaking in. Interesting. An Origin Core realm human warrior dares to sneak into the monarch mansion. This is really strange. Among the 50 princes, 2 of them had a drastic change in expression. They were not like the other princes who were watching coldly from the sidelines and gloating. These 2 people were Long Yunxiao and Yun Yao. When Long Yunxiao saw Ji Tianqing, he immediately frowned and looked surprised. He had never thought that Ji Tianqing would be so bold as to sneak into the monarch mansion. When Yun Yao saw Ji Tianqing's appearance, her eyes lit up and her heart was filled with excitement and joy. She could not believe that her telepathy earlier was real. Ji Tianqing had really entered the monarch mansion and come to her side. However, the light in her eyes immediately dimmed, and a strong sense of anxiety and worry gushed out. She knew very well that Ji Tianqing would most likely be executed by Divine Master He Yu in front of everyone. As expected, Divine Master He Yu looked at Ji Tianqing with a sharp gaze and shouted indifferently, "Kid, you are the first person who dares to sneak into the monarch mansion in the past 100 years. I will give you 3 chances to say your last words. After you say your last words, come and accept your death." The monarch mansion was a sacred place for martial arts and was the top mysterious force in the Tianxian continent. How could it allow anyone to sneak in? Divine Master He Yu did not kill Ji Tianqing immediately, and even gave him the chance to say his last words. This was already a great kindness. Many princes also looked at Ji Tianqing indifferently, and did not feel that there was anything wrong. Ji Tianqing did not want to waste any time and quickly flew towards Yun Yao. After a moment, he arrived before Yun Yao and looked at Yun Yao gently. He squeezed out a smile on his pale face. Chapter 501. Yun Yao also looked at Ji Tianqing with a worried expression. She would rather not see Ji Tianqing than see him in a desperate situation. But now that Divine Master Blackfeather had discovered him and spoke in front of everyone, the outcome seemed to be decided. Yun Yao was extremely worried, but there was nothing she could do. She could only sigh. "Tianqing, you shouldn't have come here." Ji Tianqing looked at her clear eyes and said calmly,
But I'm already here. I can only be at ease when I see that you're safe. How could Yunyao not understand his feelings? But now, it was too late to say anything. The only thing she could do was to plead with Divine Master Black Feather. At this moment, Ji Tianqing turned to look at Divine Master Black Feather. He cupped his hands and bowed respectfully. Divine Master Black Feather. I'm Ji Tianqing. I sneaked into the Monarch Mansion just to see my senior sister. I didn't mean to offend the Monarch Mansion's dignity. Please understand. Yunyao also hurriedly bowed to Divine Master Black Feather and said sincerely, Divine Master Black Feather, Tianqing is my junior brother. We were separated for a few months, and he was worried about me, so he rashly barged into the Monarch Mansion. Please forgive him, Divine Master. Divine Master Black Feather looked at Yunyao and Ji Tianqing indifferently and said coldly, the Monarch Mansion's dignity cannot be offended. No matter what difficulties he has, he must die. This is the Monarch Mansion's rule, and it cannot be changed. Yunyao pleaded again. She quickly said, Divine Master He Yu, please be lenient and spare Tianqing this time. A few months ago, when the ancient demon emperor broke through the Sky Pillar Sect's seal array, I personally experienced that calamity. As for my junior brother Tianqing, he fearlessly faced the ancient fiend emperor head-on and even injured him and forced him to retreat. He was the one who had saved the Sky Pillar Sect and the Star Ancient Realm. He had saved the billions of citizens of the Heavenly Stellar Region. He was the great hero of the Heavenly Stellar Region. If the Imperial Residence wants to deal with the ancient demonic emperor, they can't kill Tianqing. He knows the ancient demonic emperor's strength better than we do. Upon hearing Yunyao's words, everyone present was stunned. They all had expressions of disbelief and disbelief. Many princes stared at Ji Tianqing, their sharp eyes observing him as if they wanted to see through him. One of the demon race's princes said, Yunyao, aren't you exaggerating? If this person can defeat the ancient demon emperor, doesn't that mean that every one of us here can kill the ancient demon emperor? This person's words caused many princes to nod in agreement. Another young master from the water tribe chimed in, he's only at the origin core realm, not even at the heavenly origin realm. The ancient demonic emperor was an unparalleled demon from 1,000 years ago. Even if he was sealed for 1,000 years and his strength was greatly reduced, he's still not someone an origin core realm martial artist can deal with. Golden Dragon Tai Yi sat on the spiritual jade throne and calmly glanced at Yunyao. He said indifferently, that kid is Yunyao's junior brother. The two of them have a close relationship. It's understandable that Yunyao is pleading for him. However, Yunyao, you actually made up such a ridiculous lie just to plead for him. That's not befitting of a princess. Tai Yi's words naturally garnered the approval and support of many princes from the water tribe. Everyone was certain that Yunyao was lying. With Ji Tianqing's strength, it was impossible for him to defeat the ancient demonic emperor. That was simply unheard of. However, Divine Master He Yu did not speak. He frowned slightly and looked at Ji Tianqing calmly. He seemed to be in deep thought. The princes did not know about the ancient demonic emperor, but he had already known about it. That was why he had gathered the princes for a discussion. A few months ago, the ancient demonic emperor broke through the Sky Pillar Sect's seal array and started a massacre in the Star Ancient Realm. Someone stepped forward and severely injured the ancient demonic emperor, forcing him to flee. That was how the small Sky Pillar Sect survived and was not destroyed by the ancient demonic emperor. Yunyao and this kid are both disciples of the Sky Pillar Sect and should have personally experienced that disaster. If what Yunyao said is true, and the person who defeated the ancient demonic emperor is really Ji Tianqing, then this kid's talent and strength are truly unimaginable. He might even surpass the princes present. When he thought of this, Divine Master He Yu's gaze towards Ji Tianqing became much gentler. As the sacred land of martial arts in the Tianxian continent, the imperial residence stood proudly above the mortal world and usually did not care about the mundane matters of the martial arts world. Only the top martial arts prodigies would receive the imperial residence's attention and nurture. Ji Tianqing's shocking talent and strength far surpassed many of the princes present. He was the top prodigy that the imperial residence craved the most. At this moment, Long Yunxiao also stood up. He bowed to Divine Master He Yu and said with cupped hands, Divine Master He Yu, I can also testify that Ji Tianqing defeated the ancient demonic emperor. Also, Ji Tianqing did not trespass when he sneaked into the imperial residence. He has already decided to enter the imperial residence and made an agreement with me. He will challenge me in front of everyone at the Apocalypse Tower next month. He already meets the basic requirements of the imperial residence. If he can defeat me, he can pass the imperial residence's test and become the new prince.